On a deserted road, Ethan Cole and his dog return home after months of separation. Ethan Cole and his dog encounter a woman trapped in a burning car. The girl Ethan Cole and his ranger rescue, and the truth behind the accident. The girl is on the run from the town where her mother's death was hidden for 16 years. The girl's story and the buried truth inadvertently become entangled with a secret Ethan Cole has avoided all this time. Will Ethan Cole and his dog help the girl uncover the truth? And will Ethan Cole dare to confront the secret he wants to forget? If this story resonates with you, please leave a comment, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to help us reach 5,000 subscribers and give us more motivation to write better stories. Ethan Cole had always believed a man could leave a place behind if he stayed gone long enough. For 32 years, he had tested that belief across deserts, ports, frozen airstrips, temporary barracks, military hospitals, and cheap rented rooms where the walls were too thin and the nights too loud. He had worn uniforms until they became a second skin. He had learned how to sleep sitting upright, how to wake without moving, how to count exits before reading a menu. He had survived places designed to take men apart. But Montana had waited. The road into red ash bent through pine country and pale stone ridges, the old two-lane highway climbing and falling like it had been laid over the spine of something sleeping. Late afternoon light slanted through the trees, cold and thin, catching on patches of snow that had survived in the shadows. The sky was a hard northern blue. Beautiful, if a man trusted beauty. Ethan did not. He drove with both hands loose on the wheel of his old black pickup, shoulders squared beneath a faded olive-gray tactical shirt, gone soft from years of washing. The fabric was frayed at the cuffs and worn pale along one shoulder where a seatbelt had rubbed it on too many long drives. His combat pants, brown-green and scuffed at the knees, had seen better weather and worse days. Nothing on him was new. Nothing on him asked to be noticed. At 57, Ethan was still a large man, a little over 6 feet, broad across the shoulders, lean in the way of men who had never let comfort settle fully into their bones. His face was clean-shaven, almost severe because of it, the square jaw and high cheekbones left bare to the cold light. His dark brown hair was clipped short at the sides, longer than regulation on top, stirred now and then by air slipping through the cracked window. His eyes, gray-blue and steady, rarely gave away what moved behind them. In the passenger seat, Ranger slept with his head turned toward the road. The German Shepherd was not truly asleep. Not anymore. At 9.5, Ranger had learned the same trick Ethan had. Rest without surrender. His black and gold coat rose and fell with slow breaths. The black saddle across his back had dulled with age, and silver hairs had begun to gather around his muzzle and eyes. His right ear, missing a small notch along the top edge, twitched whenever gravel snapped under the tires. One rear leg lay tucked at a careful angle, the old injury stiffening in the cold. Ethan glanced at him. "You remember this place?" he asked. Ranger opened one amber-brown eye, considered the question, then closed it again. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Me neither." That was a lie, and he knew it before the words faded. He remembered too much. He remembered the smell of wet pine after the first thaw, the high school football field with its uneven lights, his mother's hands dusted in flour, his father coming home with sawdust in his sleeves and silence in his mouth. He remembered his brother Thomas laughing from the hood of a patrol car, one boot on the bumper, hat pushed back, acting like the whole town was something he could protect if he stood tall enough. Thomas Cole had been 29 when he died. A hunting accident, they had called it. Bad weather, bad footing, bad luck. Men in red ash liked explanations that came in threes. They sounded complete that way. Ethan had been 24 then, angry enough to mistake leaving for justice. He had signed papers, shaved his head, and put oceans between himself and the graveyard on the hill. The Navy had taken his rage and given it structure. The SEAL teams had taken his body and made it useful. Years later, when people asked where he was from, he gave the name of the state, but not the town. Now his father was dead too. The old man had passed quietly in a county care facility 3 towns away, leaving behind a cabin on the edge of red ash, unpaid property taxes, bank notices, a rusted well pump, and boxes Ethan had not opened in his mind for decades. There had been no dramatic summons, no deathbed confession, no letter beginning with "son." Just a lawyer's message, a stack of paperwork, and the blunt fact that neglect also had a due date. So Ethan had come back. Not for forgiveness, not for family, not for home, for signatures. A green road sign appeared ahead, its white letters scarred by bullet marks and weather. Red ash, 6 miles. Ethan's grip tightened before he noticed it. Ranger noticed first. The dog lifted his head. At first, Ethan thought it was the sign. Ranger had always read the changes in Ethan's body before Ethan did. The smallest shift in breath, the tightening of a tendon, the delay before an answer. In the years after deployment, there had been nights when Ranger woke him before the nightmare broke the surface. Not by barking, never that. He would press his weight against the bed until Ethan came back to the room. But this was different. Ranger's ears angled forward. His nostrils widened. His whole body gathered itself, old age receding under training. Ethan eased off the gas. What is it? Ranger stood on the seat, front paws braced against the dashboard, staring past the road sign toward the next bend. A low sound formed in his chest. Not fear, not aggression. Warning. The highway curved left around a wall of pines. Beyond it lay the old service road toward Mercer Quarry, or what had once been Mercer Quarry. Ethan remembered trucks grinding that way at dawn, men in hard hats, dust hanging in the summer heat. The Mercer family had owned half the town when Ethan was a boy, and had acted as if they were doing everyone a kindness by owning it. Ranger barked once, sharp, commanding. Ethan saw the smoke then, a dark ribbon twisting above the trees, too black for chimney smoke, too low for a controlled burn. He hit the brakes hard enough for loose tools to slide in the bed of the pickup. Gravel spat under the tires as he pulled onto the shoulder. Ranger was already moving before the truck stopped. "Stay," Ethan said. The dog froze, muscles trembling with refusal. Ethan looked down the slope beyond the guardrail. At first, he saw only broken brush and disturbed earth. Then metal flashed between the trees. A car lay upside down in the ditch, half hidden by saplings, its front end crumpled against a granite outcrop. Flames licked from beneath the hood. Smoke pressed low through the ravine, thick and oily. For 1 second, everything in Ethan became very still. The part of him trained for chaos woke cleanly. He grabbed the fire extinguisher from behind the seat, shoved open the door, and pointed at Ranger. "Out! Roadside!" Ranger jumped down, favoring his bad leg for half a step before finding his balance. He did not follow Ethan into the ditch. Instead, he ran to the edge of the highway and planted himself there, barking toward the blind curve behind them. Good dog, Ethan thought, already moving. He slid down the slope, boots tearing through wet leaves and loose dirt. Heat pushed against his face before he reached the car. The windshield was spiderwebbed white. One tire still turned lazily, ticking against a branch. The air smelled of burning rubber, antifreeze, hot metal, and something else. Gasoline. Too much of it. Ethan pulled his sleeve over his mouth and crouched by the driver's side. The door had collapsed inward. Through the cracked side window, he saw a young woman hanging partly sideways in the seatbelt, hair fallen across her face, one arm trapped beneath the deflated airbag. Blood ran from a cut near her temple. She was moving, barely. "Hey," Ethan called. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered, brown, unfocused, terrified. "Don't." Her voice was no more than smoke. "Don't let them." The flames snapped louder. Ethan tried the door. Jammed. He moved to the rear, found the passenger side less crushed, and drove the base of the extinguisher into the cracked window. Once. Twice. The glass gave on the third strike, falling inward in glittering chunks. Behind him, Ranger's barking changed rhythm. Faster now. A vehicle was coming. Ethan did not look back. He cleared glass with his forearm, reached inside, and unlocked what remained of the door. It opened 6 inches before the frame caught. Not enough. He dropped low, braced one boot against the rocker panel, and pulled until something in the metal shrieked. The gap widened. Smoke rolled into his face. The woman coughed, and the sound seemed to pull the whole world down to that one fragile body trapped inside a burning machine. "I'm going to cut the belt," Ethan said, though he did not know if she understood. "You're coming out." "No hospital," she whispered. "We'll argue later." His knife came free from his pocket. The seatbelt resisted, then split. Her body sagged. Ethan caught her under the shoulders, but her left hand was still pinned. He leaned farther in and saw the problem. A bent bracket from beneath the dash had trapped the sleeve of her jacket and part of the airbag fabric around her wrist. Not deep, but enough. Her skin there was marked by narrow red bands, not from the crash. Ethan stared at them for half a second too long. A horn blared above on the highway. Ranger barked again, holding the road, warning whoever had nearly come around the curve too fast. Tires hissed on gravel. The vehicle slowed and passed. Ethan went back to the bracket. He cut the fabric around her wrist, twisted the metal with both hands, and freed her. The fire found something under the hood and bloomed brighter. The woman screamed once as Ethan pulled her through the gap. Not loud. More like a sound torn from a place beyond speech. He dragged her clear of the car, half carrying her up the slope as heat swelled behind them. Ranger left the roadside only when Ethan whistled. The dog bounded down 3 steps, seized the woman's jacket hem gently between his teeth, and helped pull as Ethan climbed backward through mud and pine needles. They reached the shoulder just as the first sharp pop cracked from below, then another. Ethan dropped over the guardrail with the woman in his arms, shielding her with his body. Ranger pressed against his side, panting hard. Down in the ditch, the flames crawled through the cabin, orange reflecting in the broken glass. The woman's eyes opened. For a moment, she seemed to see Ethan clearly. "They hit me," she said. "Who?" Her gaze slid past him toward the smoke. "Don't call Harlan." Ethan went still. The name hit some old wall in his memory. Harlan. Wade Harlan. Deputy Harlan back then. Younger, heavier through the shoulders, always standing just behind men with more power than him. Ethan remembered him at Thomas's funeral, hat held against his chest, eyes lowered in a performance of grief. The woman's fingers closed weakly around Ethan's sleeve. "My mother," her breath hitched. "She didn't kill herself." Then her eyes rolled back and her hand fell away. For a few seconds, Ethan heard only the fire. Ranger lowered his head toward the woman's face, sniffed once, then stepped over her legs and stood facing the road. Not aggressive, guarding. Ethan looked at the red marks around her wrist, looked at the ditch, looked at the smoke. A man could leave a place behind, he had told himself. The place did not always agree. Sirens arrived in layers, first distant and thin, then swelling across the trees. An ambulance pulled in behind Ethan's truck. A sheriff's SUV followed, its lights washing blue and red over the pines. 2 volunteer firefighters jumped out of a second vehicle and hurried toward the ditch with hoses and gear. Ethan stood when the paramedics reached him. "Female, mid-20s, he said automatically. "Possible concussion, smoke inhalation, laceration near the right temple, burns maybe minor on hands, wrist trauma. She was conscious for under a minute." The older paramedic gave him a quick look, taking in the clipped delivery, the posture, the blood on his sleeve that was not his. "You family?" "No." "Name?" "Don't know." They moved the woman onto a stretcher. Ranger tried to follow. Ethan touched 2 fingers to the dog's collar. "Easy." Ranger stopped, but his eyes stayed on her. The sheriff's SUV door opened. Wade Harlan stepped out like a man arriving at a town meeting rather than a wreck. He was nearly 60 now, thick through the neck and middle, clean-shaven, his short salt and pepper hair flattened by his hat. His uniform jacket fit well. His badge was polished. His face carried the practiced concern of a man who had learned that calm could pass for honesty. "Ethan Cole," Harlan said, not a question. Ethan turned slowly. "Harlan." "Been a long time." Harlan's eyes moved over him, then to Ranger, then to the burning car below. "Hell of a welcome home." Ethan said nothing. Harlan did not seem offended. Men like him rarely did. They took silence as something to step around. "Heard your father passed," Harlan added. "Sorry for your loss." Ethan watched one of Harlan's deputies move near the rear of the wreck below. Young, nervous, maybe 30. The deputy bent and picked something from the mud near the back tire, then slipped it into a small evidence bag with unusual speed. Too quick, Ethan thought. The fire captain shouted for space. The paramedics loaded the woman into the ambulance. Harlan looked after her. "Poor girl must have lost control coming around the bend," he said. "No skid marks on the road," Ethan replied. Harlan's gaze returned to him. The concern did not leave his face, but something behind it paused. "Road's damp. Marks don't always hold. The impact angle's wrong for a simple slide. You working traffic reconstruction now?" "No." A faint smile touched Harlan's mouth. "Then we'll take it from here." The sentence was polite. The meaning was not. Ranger moved closer to Ethan's leg. When Harlan took one step toward the ambulance, the dog gave a low growl. Harlan stopped. Ethan felt the vibration before he heard it. Ranger's body had gone rigid, his notched right ear tilted back, nose working the air. "What's wrong with him?" Harlan asked. Ethan looked at the sheriff's gloves. Dark leather, damp at the fingertips. A smell drifted between them when the wind shifted. Gasoline, but sharper, more industrial than what leaked from ordinary tanks. The same smell that had hit Ethan below near the car. "Cold weather makes him irritable," Ethan said. Harlan held Ethan's stare for a beat, then smiled again. "Best keep him close." "I do." The ambulance doors closed. Through the small rear window, Ethan saw the young woman's pale face beneath an oxygen mask, hair stuck to her cheek with blood and soot. She looked impossibly young, though not childlike, more like someone who had spent years being told fear was proof she was unstable, only to have fear save her life. Harlan stepped nearer, but not too near Ranger. "She say anything before she passed out?" Ethan wiped soot from his thumb with the edge of his shirt. He could have answered cleanly. He could have said exactly what she had said, handed over the words like spent brass, let the system take them. Instead, he thought of Thomas, a coffin under a gray sky, Wade Harlan standing in the rain, his father saying, "Let it be, son, because some towns don't give back what they take." "No," Ethan said. "Nothing that made sense." Harlan studied him. The siren started as the ambulance pulled away toward Red Ash Community Hospital. Ranger watched until the lights disappeared around the bend. For a while, the roadside was all movement. Firefighters killing the last of the flames, deputies measuring badly, Harlan speaking into his radio, the young deputy avoiding Ethan's eyes. The official story was already forming in the cold air. Young woman, bad curve, panic, accident. Neat enough to fit on a report. Ethan knew neat stories. He had seen them laid over ugly things all over the world. Eventually, Harlan took Ethan's statement, or the version Ethan chose to give him. Time of arrival, condition of the vehicle, rescue. No, he had not touched anything beyond what was necessary to remove the victim. Yes, he would be staying in town for a while. No, he did not need medical attention. When Harlan finally walked away, Ranger leaned against Ethan's leg. The pressure was slight. Enough. Ethan looked down at the dog. Mud streaked Ranger's chest. Smoke had darkened the gold fur near his neck. His bad rear leg trembled now that the urgency had passed, but he did not lie down. His gaze remained fixed on the road to town. "You think I don't know?" Ethan murmured. Ranger did not move. Ethan looked toward Red Ash. 6 miles. A dead father. An empty cabin. A girl on a stretcher. A name from the past, spoken like a warning. He had come back to sign papers and bury what little remained of his obligations. That had been the plan. Keep his head down. Settle the estate. Sell the cabin if he had to. Leave before old ghosts learned his footsteps. But plans belonged to men who still believed the road cared where they meant to go. Ethan opened the passenger door of the pickup. Ranger climbed in slowly, favoring his stiff leg. Ethan stood a moment longer outside the truck, cold air burning his throat, the smell of smoke clinging to his clothes. Then he got behind the wheel. The turnoff to Red Ash waited ahead. The hospital was in town. Ethan started the engine and drove toward both. Red Ash Community Hospital sat on a low hill above town. A square brick building with narrow windows and a flagpole that clicked in the wind. Ethan remembered it smaller. Or maybe everything in Red Ash had shrunk while he was gone. The streets below looked too quiet. The storefronts pressed close together as if bracing against the cold. A gas station glowed at the edge of the main road. Beyond it, the dark shape of the old water tower rose over the roofs, the Mercer name still painted across its side in fading white letters. Mercer Materials, building Red Ash since 1948. Ethan parked near the emergency entrance and sat for a moment with the engine running. Ranger watched the sliding doors. "You stay close," Ethan said. The German shepherd flicked his notched ear, but did not look away from the hospital. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant, burnt coffee, old heating vents, and wet coats. It was not the smell of a military hospital, not blood and iodine and metal, but Ethan's body did not care about the difference. His shoulders tightened anyway. Places where pain was catalogued and waiting rooms swallowed bad news all had a similar silence beneath the noise. A nurse at the desk began to tell him that dogs were not allowed past the lobby. She stopped when Ranger sat beside Ethan's leg without being told. Calm as stone, his old leather collar dark against his thick gold and black fur. "He's a retired service dog," Ethan said. It was not the whole truth, but it was enough. The nurse hesitated, then pointed down the hall. "Exam 3, but don't crowd the staff." "I won't." "You're the man from the wreck?" Ethan nodded. Her expression softened for half a second, then closed again in the practiced way of people who worked in small towns. Sympathy was allowed. Curiosity was dangerous. A woman in a white coat stepped out from behind a curtain before Ethan reached the room. "Ethan Cole," she said. He stopped. For a moment, he saw only the doctor. Mid-50s, blonde-gray hair cut bluntly near her jaw, sleeves pushed up under her lab coat, a stethoscope hanging from one pocket rather than around her neck. Her face was not soft, but it was tired in an honest way. Then memory adjusted itself. "Nora Whitcomb," he said. "Dr. Whitcomb now." "I figured." Her mouth almost smiled. Almost. "You always were quick." Nora had been 3 years behind Thomas in school. Ethan remembered her as a girl who carried library books against her chest and argued with teachers without raising her voice. Now there were fine lines around her pale blue eyes and a steadiness in her posture that came from years of telling people things they did not want to hear. She looked at the blood and soot on his shirt, then at Ranger. "You hurt?" "No." "That wasn't my question." "No injury that needs you." "Still stubborn, then?" "Still breathing." "That is not the same thing." The words landed closer than Ethan wanted. He looked past her toward the curtained room. "How is she?" Nora's face changed. Whatever was left of old recognition disappeared behind the doctor. "Alive. Mild concussion as far as I can tell. Smoke inhalation, but her oxygen levels are improving. Small burns on her left hand and forearm. Laceration near the temple. Bruising on both wrists." She paused. "The wrist marks bother me." "They should." Nora's eyes held his for a beat. She had heard more in that answer than most people would. "Her name is Lily Harper," she said. 24. Local." Ethan repeated the name silently. Lily Harper. It did not belong to the blood and smoke in his memory yet. "Family?" "Grandmother raised her, died last winter. No immediate family listed." Nora glanced toward the nurse's station before lowering her voice. Her mother was Sarah Harper. The name meant nothing at first. Then Ethan saw the ambulance window again, the girl's pale face beneath the oxygen mask. My mother didn't kill herself. "What happened to Sarah Harper?" he asked. Nora's jaw tightened. "Officially? Suicide. 16 years ago. Drove her car into Black Pine Lake." "Unofficially?" In Red Ash, unofficial things have a way of getting people tired, unemployed, or buried. Ranger shifted his weight, leaning lightly against Ethan's leg. The old dog did not like the hospital corridor. Too many moving feet, too many closed doors. Nora noticed. "He's older than I expected." "So am I." This time her near smile had sadness in it. Thomas would have said the same thing. The name crossed the hallway like a draft. Ethan looked away first. Nora did not apologize. That was one thing he respected immediately. People in Red Ash had always apologized for mentioning Thomas, as if his brother had become an illness they might spread by saying his name. She woke once, Nora said. Asked if Harlan was here. When I said he'd been called to the scene, she tried to pull out her IV. Ethan's gaze returned to the curtained room. Can I see her? She may not want to see you. Then I'll stand where she can tell me to leave. Nora studied him for a moment. That sounds almost civilized. Don't tell anyone. She drew the curtain back. Lily Harper lay propped against white pillows, one side of her face shadowed by bruising. Soot still clung in faint gray smears near her hairline, despite the nurse's work. Her light brown hair had been tied back loosely, but a burned section near the ends curled shorter than the rest. An oxygen tube rested beneath her nose. A clear IV line ran into her arm. Around her left wrist, red bands showed beneath medical gauze. She was awake. Her eyes went first to Ethan, then to Ranger, then back to Ethan with a sharpness that cut through the medication. "Who are you?" she asked. Her voice was raw. Ethan Cole. The name struck her. Not recognition exactly. More like a key failing to turn in a lock. Cole? Yes. She tried to sit up too fast. Pain caught her. Nora stepped forward, but Lily flinched so hard the doctor stopped. Easy, Nora said. You're in the hospital. You were in a crash. Lily looked at Ethan. You brought me here? Ambulance did. You called them. I pulled you out of a burning car. The rest got crowded. Her eyes narrowed. Fear made her young, but suspicion made her older. Are you with him? With who? You know who. Ethan did not answer too quickly. Harlan? At the name, her fingers twisted in the sheet. Ranger lowered himself to the floor near the door, not close to the bed, not blocking the exit, just present. Lily watched the dog. Her breathing changed by a fraction, still fast, but less jagged. He yours? She asked. Mostly. What does that mean? Means he thinks I'm his. A faint confusion crossed her face, almost enough to become a laugh, but pain swallowed it. Nora adjusted the IV line. Lily, Ethan is the man who got you out. Lily's gaze returned to him. Why? It was the sort of question no one asked after being saved, unless life had taught them rescue always had a price. Ethan had no clean answer. Because you were there. Because the car was burning. Because I still move toward trouble when a voice is trapped inside it. He said, You needed out. She looked as if she hated how simple that sounded. Nora excused herself to check on imaging results, though Ethan suspected she stayed just beyond the curtain. For a while, the room held only the soft beep of a monitor and the hum of fluorescent lights. Lily spoke first. My bag, she said. What bag? I had a brown canvas bag in the car. I didn't see one. Her eyes closed. Was it important? Ethan asked. She gave a dry, painful laugh. No, I just like almost dying for office supplies. Ranger lifted his head at the tone. Ethan leaned one shoulder against the wall. You said someone hit you. Lily opened her eyes. I said that? Yes. What else did I say? That you didn't want Harlan called. Her face drained of what little color it had. Ethan continued before she could retreat completely. And something about your mother. The heart monitor quickened. Lily stared at him for several seconds. Then she looked at Ranger again, as if the dog were the only thing in the room that had not yet chosen a side. My mother's name was Sarah Harper. she said. She worked for Mercer Freight. Accounting, payroll, shipping records. They said she drove into Black Pine Lake because she was depressed. Her mouth tightened. They said a lot of things after she was dead. Ethan said nothing. Lily seemed to take his silence as permission. My grandmother kept a box. I found it after she passed. Old copies, freight codes, notes in my mother's handwriting, names, dates. Some of it I didn't understand at first. Her voice weakened, but she forced it steady. I worked records at the county courthouse, part-time. Filing, scanning, archive requests. I know what amended reports look like. I know when a page has been replaced. Ethan watched her hand move toward her chest. Her fingers touched a thin silver chain at her neck. A small key hung there. In one of my mother's notes, Lily said, there was a line. If anything happens, find Thomas Cole or his blood. The room seemed to narrow. Ethan did not move. He did not blink. Somewhere behind him, Ranger rose from the floor. Lily saw his face change. You know that name. He was my brother. The words came out flat, but something old tore beneath them. Lily's eyes filled with horror, noting fear this time, but understanding arriving too late. I didn't know. I thought someone in his family might still be here. He's dead. I'm sorry. So am I. The apology was not for her. For a moment, they were not rescuer and victim. They were two people standing on opposite sides of the same grave without having known it. Lily swallowed hard. Then they killed both of them. Ethan looked toward the covered window. Outside, dusk had thickened over the town. We don't know that, he said. You don't want to know that. The words hit clean. Ethan's first instinct was anger. Not loud anger, the cold kind. The kind that made him straighten and look for exits and decide exactly how far away to stand from another human being. But Lily did not look triumphant. She looked exhausted, terrified, alone in a way he recognized against his will. Before he could answer, footsteps approached with the controlled rhythm of authority. Nora entered first, and Ethan could tell from her face that she had tried to delay whoever followed. Wade Harlan stepped into the room, holding his hat in one hand. Lily, he said gently, you gave us quite a scare. Lily's body went rigid. Harlan looked exactly as he had at the roadside. Clean, steady, almost fatherly if a person did not know what to look for. His sheriff's jacket was zipped halfway. His gloves were gone now. Ethan wondered where they were. Harlan, Ethan said. Cole. Harlan nodded once, then turned back to the bed. Doctor says you took a hard hit. It's normal to be confused after a wreck. I'm not confused, Lily said. Of course not. His tone made the words mean the opposite. We just need to ask some questions when you're feeling up to it. You can ask here. I'd rather get you somewhere quieter, safer. The station has private rooms. Lily's breathing sharpened. Nora stepped in. She is not medically cleared for transport to the station. Harlan did not look at Nora. I said when she's feeling up to it. She's a patient. She's also involved in an active investigation. Ethan watched Lily's fingers clutch the sheet. Her gaze had fixed on the doorway behind Harlan, calculating distance and failure. Ranger moved. Not a lunge, not a growl. He simply stepped between the bed and Harlan, head low, body still. The room went silent. Harlan looked down at the dog, then at Ethan. You want to explain that? He doesn't like crowded rooms. This hospital full of service animals now? No, Nora said sharply. But this patient is showing acute distress, and your presence is worsening it. Harlan's smile faded by 1 degree. There it was, Ethan thought. The first crack. Harlan put his hat back on slowly. I'll come back when everyone's calmer. At the curtain, he paused. Lily, he said, almost kindly, running from help is how people get hurt worse. Then he left. Lily did not breathe properly until his footsteps disappeared. Nora closed the curtain and turned to Ethan. You see it now? I saw enough. No, Lily whispered. You saw a little. That night, the hospital settled into its thin, rural quiet. Nurses moved like ghosts. The vending machine at the end of the hall buzzed and clicked. Somewhere, a television murmured in a waiting room where no one was watching. Ethan sat outside Lily's room with Ranger at his feet. He told himself he was waiting for Harlan to leave. Then he told himself he was waiting until morning. Then he stopped lying for a while. Just after midnight, Ranger's head lifted. Ethan looked up. A man in a dark jacket stood near the service door at the end of the hall. Not staff. Too still. Too interested in the room numbers. Ethan rose. The man saw him and moved fast. Ranger was faster in warning than in body now, but the warning was enough. His growl rolled down the hallway, deep and unmistakable. A nurse looked up from the station. The man turned toward Lily's door. Ethan reached him before he got there. They hit the wall hard enough to rattle a framed poster about hand hygiene. The man swung an elbow. Ethan took it on the shoulder, drove him sideways, and pinned his wrist behind his back. The man was younger, strong, smelling of cold air and cigarettes. Not trained well enough to be calm, trained enough to be dangerous. Who sent you? Ethan said. The man twisted, slipped partly free, and slammed his hand against the fire alarm pole. The hallway exploded in sound. Red lights flashed. Doors opened. A nurse shouted. The man used the chaos well, driving his heel into Ethan's shin and wrenching away. Ranger surged forward, but Ethan snapped, "No!" because the hallway was suddenly full of people. The man backed toward the service exit, breathing hard. His eyes locked on Ethan. "Old SEAL," he said, voice low enough that only Ethan heard. "You saved the wrong girl." Then he shoved through the door and vanished into the alarm-lit night. By the time security reached the hall, there was no one to catch. Nora came running from the nurse's station, coat open over blue-gray scrubs. "What happened?" "Visitor," Ethan said. "At midnight?" "He didn't bring flowers." Lily appeared at the edge of the curtain, pale and shaking, one hand gripping the IV pole. "I'm leaving," she said. Nora turned. "Lily, I'm leaving." "You have a concussion. I know my name. I know the date. I know who tried to get into my room." Her voice broke, then hardened. "And I know Harlan will come back with paperwork that makes this look like concern." Nora looked at Ethan. He said nothing. This had to be Lily's decision. If he carried her out of here, Harlan would have the story he needed by morning. Nora understood. It took 20 minutes. She checked Lily's pupils, orientation, blood pressure, oxygen levels. She explained the risks of leaving: dizziness, vomiting, confusion, worsening headache, shortness of breath. Lily listened and signed the refusal of continued treatment with a hand that shook but did not stop. Nora did not falsify a chart. She did not pretend Lily was safer than she was. She only treated her like an adult whose fear had evidence behind it. Then she brought a wool coat from a staff locker, dark blue and too large in the shoulders. "My sister left this here last winter," Nora said. "She won't miss it tonight." Lily slipped into it. The coat swallowed her thin frame. Nora handed Ethan a folded paper. "Discharge instructions. Watch her breathing. Don't let her sleep more than 2 hours without checking responsiveness. If she vomits repeatedly, passes out, or gets worse, you bring her back or call an ambulance, whether she likes it or not." "I will." Nora held his gaze. "And Ethan?" He waited. "Wade asked me 3 times what she said at the scene. Not what her injuries were, not whether she'd live. What she said." Lily closed her eyes. Ranger stood by the service exit, ready. Nora unlocked the rear corridor door and looked once toward the empty hall. "I can't protect her here," she said quietly. Ethan looked at Lily. "You sure?" "No," Lily said, "but I'm leaving anyway." That answer, more than any brave speech, decided it. They moved through the back corridor into the cold. The hospital's rear lot was dim, bordered by dumpsters, snow crust, and bare-limbed trees. Ethan helped Lily into the passenger side of the truck. Ranger climbed into the back seat this time, positioning himself behind her instead of beside Ethan. Lily noticed. So did Ethan. He shut the door gently. For a moment, Nora stood under the yellow security light, arms folded against the cold, watching them as if she were sending more than one wounded person into the dark. Ethan got behind the wheel. "Where are we going?" Lily asked. "My father's cabin." "Is it safe?" "No." She turned her head toward him. He started the engine. "But it's mine." The truck rolled out of the hospital lot and down the back road toward the edge of town. Behind them, Red Ash Community Hospital glowed against the hill, bright and helpless. Ahead, the forest waited black beyond the last streetlight. Ethan told himself this was temporary. One night. Long enough for Lily to breathe. Long enough to decide who could be trusted. Long enough to keep a frightened girl from being taken by a man whose name still smelled of gasoline and old graves. But as Ranger rested his head on the back of Lily's seat, and Lily closed one trembling hand around the little silver key at her throat, Ethan understood the truth with the kind of clarity he hated. He had crossed the line already. There was no going back to being a man who had only stopped at an accident. Ethan's father's cabin stood where the pine woods began to climb. The headlights caught it in pieces, the sag of the porch roof, the split rail fence leaning toward the weeds, the front steps dark with old rot and last week's rain. A wind chime made from rusted spoons hung near the door, turning slowly in the cold. One of the windows had been patched with plywood. Another reflected the truck lights like a dead eye. For a moment, Ethan did not shut off the engine. Lily sat beside him in Nora Whitcomb's borrowed coat, her face pale under the dashboard glow. The wool swallowed her shoulders and made her look younger than 24, but the way she watched the cabin was not young. It was the look of someone measuring whether a shelter might become a trap. In the back seat, Ranger raised his head and breathed against the glass. "This is it?" Lily asked. "It's a cabin." "I didn't ask what it was." Ethan turned off the engine. The sudden silence made the woods seem closer. "It was my father's," he said. Lily looked at him then, but did not ask the obvious question. "Why did you say 'was'? Why does a son return to his dead father's house like a trespasser?" Ethan appreciated that more than he wanted to. He stepped out first, the cold hitting the sweat-dried soot on his neck. Ranger followed, landing carefully, favoring his stiff rear leg before straightening. The dog stood still, nose lifted, reading the property in ways Ethan could not. Wet wood, old ash, mice in the crawlspace, pine resin, the faint mineral smell of distant stone. No immediate threat. That did not mean safe. Ethan kept Lily behind him as he climbed the porch. The boards complained under his boots. He found the spare key where it had been hidden since childhood, inside a dented coffee can behind a loose foundation stone. His father had never trusted banks, locks, doctors, or any system larger than a wood stove. The key turned hard. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust, cold ashes, and damp cedar. Ethan flicked the switch. Nothing. He tried again, though he knew better. "Power's out?" Lily asked. "Or unpaid. Do you have a flashlight?" He pulled one from his jacket pocket and switched it on. The beam cut across a room preserved in neglect. A brown couch covered in a sheet. An iron stove crouched near the far wall. Stacks of old newspapers tied with twine. A wooden table with one chair pushed in and one left at an angle, as if the man who had sat there had stood up and never returned. Ethan did not move for several seconds. Memory had a smell. He had forgotten that, or tried to. His father's tobacco, his mother's lemon soap, long gone but somehow still buried in the boards. Gun oil from winters when Thomas used to clean his hunting rifle by the stove, while Ethan pretended not to watch and watched anyway. Ranger brushed against his leg. Ethan exhaled. "Stay by the stove," he told Lily. "I'll get heat going." "I can help." "You have a concussion." "I have hands." "You also have discharge instructions." "I don't like being managed." "That makes two of us." Her mouth tightened, but she sat on the edge of the covered couch and did not argue further. Ethan built a fire from the dry logs stacked near the stove. His father had left enough kindling for a man who expected winter to come, no matter who died before it. The first flames took slowly, then climbed, orange light filling the room in a way electricity never could. Shadows moved over the walls. Lily watched the fire, one hand at her throat. Her fingers worried the small silver key on its chain. Ranger lay across the space between the door and the main room, not sleeping, guarding, always guarding. When the room began to warm, Ethan found an old kettle, rinsed it twice, and set water over the stove. He moved by habit through cupboards he had not opened in decades. Tin mugs, a box of salt, cans of beans, coffee so old it might have become part of the cabin by now. "You don't have to do this," Lily said. "What?" "Pretend you're only being practical." Ethan glanced at her. She looked tired enough to break, but her eyes stayed alert. Brown, bruised by exhaustion, too used to defending a truth no one wanted. "I am practical," he said. "No, practical would have been leaving me at the hospital." He took 2 mugs down from a shelf. "You signed yourself out. You drove. You asked where we were going. You didn't answer honestly." He poured hot water over stale coffee grounds and let the accusation sit. Outside, the wind moved through the pines. From here, red ash was invisible, but Ethan knew where it lay. 20 minutes downhill, pressed into its valley, living under church steeples, school banners, and the long shadow of the Mercer name. Lily followed his gaze to the dark window. "You know how they do it?" she asked. "Who?" "The Mercers." Ethan did not answer. He brought her a mug and took the chair opposite the couch. Lily wrapped both hands around the warmth. Her left wrist was bandaged. The fingers trembled slightly. "They don't have to threaten everyone," she said. "Not directly. They pay for the Little League uniforms. They fix the roof at the Methodist church. Grant Mercer gives scholarships to kids whose parents work at the quarry. He buys the ambulance a new defibrillator and smiles for the paper." Ethan saw Grant Mercer as he had been 30 years ago. Tall, clean, silver beginning at the temples even then, shaking hands at Thomas's funeral as if grief were another civic event. People like men who pay for things, Ethan said. People need men who pay for things. Lily's voice was bitter, but not naive. That's worse. The distinction mattered. Ethan heard it. She looked down into her mug. When my mother died, half the town acted sad. The other half acted relieved. Because if Sarah Harper was just a sad woman who drove into a lake, then nobody had to ask why she was scared before she died. You remember her? Lily's face softened, and for the first time, she looked exactly her age. Pieces. Her perfume, her red scarf, the way she tapped numbers with her pencil before she wrote them down. She used to tell me numbers were like people. If you listened long enough, they told you where they'd been. Ethan looked at the fire. Thomas liked people better than numbers. Maybe that's why she trusted him. The statement settled between them. Ethan did not want it there. He did not want Thomas brought into this room as if his ghost had been waiting politely for a witness. But everything about the cabin seemed to make refusal childish. The dust, the old chair, the empty hooks by the door where his father's coat used to hang. Lily shifted carefully and reached beneath Nora's borrowed coat. From inside her sweater, she withdrew a folded plastic sleeve, creased and smudged with soot. Ethan looked at it. You said your bag was gone. It is. She held the sleeve tighter. This wasn't in the bag. Where was it? Taped under the lining. You pulled that from the car? I pulled it from my jacket before I ran. Her eyes flicked to him. I didn't know if I'd get another chance. Inside the sleeve were a few folded papers, a photocopied freight manifest, a strip of old photographs, and a page covered in handwriting so neat it looked almost printed. Lily laid them on the table. Ethan did not touch them at first. The photograph lay on top. Two people stood outside what looked like the county courthouse. The woman was young, dark-haired, narrow-shouldered, with a serious mouth and one hand raised to block the sun. Beside her stood Thomas Cole in deputy uniform, hat tucked under one arm, smiling in a way that made Ethan's chest constrict. Not the funeral portrait. Not the stiff memory worn smooth by grief. Thomas alive. Thomas before the coffin. Ethan reached for the photograph, then stopped with his hand above it. His breath had gone wrong. Ranger rose. Lily noticed immediately. Ethan? He could hear rain, though there was no rain. A rifle shot that might have been a branch cracking. His father's voice saying, "Let it be." His own younger voice shouting in the yard until his throat tore. The room narrowed to the picture. Thomas's smile. Sarah Harper standing beside him. A connection that had existed while Ethan was too angry to ask why. Ranger stepped under Ethan's hand and pushed his muzzle into Ethan's palm. The contact was firm, warm, insistent. Not dramatic, not pleading. A command in the language they had built from years of bad nights. Here. Now. Ethan closed his fingers around the dog's head and held on. The fire popped in the stove. Slowly, the cabin returned. Lily was watching him, but not with pity. That helped. Pity would have made him leave the room. He was my older brother, Ethan said. I know. No, you know the name. His voice came rougher than he intended. You don't know what that means. Lily accepted the correction with a small nod. Ethan looked at the photograph again. Where did you find this? In my grandmother's cedar chest. It was with my mother's papers. She slid the handwritten page toward him. There were freight codes, license plates, weight discrepancies. Most of it was tied to Mercer Freight.
My mother wrote notes beside some of them. I didn't understand at first.
But you learned.
I worked at the county courthouse archive, part-time, filing, scanning, pulling old requests for lawyers who treated me like furniture. A faint edge entered her voice. People underestimate you when they think you're just the girl from the sad story. Ethan read the top line of Sarah Harper's note. If anything happens, find Thomas Cole or his blood. He looked away.
Why didn't you take this to state police? He asked. I tried to do it the proper way. What happened? I made copies of 3 pages, not the Thomas page, just freight records and a request to reopen my mother's case. I dropped them at the sheriff's office because Harlan handles cold files before they go up the chain. She gave a humorless laugh. 2 days later, someone broke into my apartment. Anything stolen? Only the obvious stuff. Laptop, old external drive, a shoebox with my mother's letters. They left cash in a jar on the kitchen shelf. They wanted you to know what they came for. Yes. And you stayed in town. My mother died there. My grandmother died there. I was tired of letting other people decide when I should be afraid. Ethan said nothing. Lily continued, the words coming faster now, not because she trusted him completely, but because exhaustion had weakened the walls she had built around them. A week after the break-in, a black pickup started following me. No plates, tinted windows. I reported it. Deputy at the desk told me stress can make people notice patterns that aren't there. Was it Owen Pike? She frowned. No, older, bald. I don't know his name. And last night? I got a call from a blocked number, a man's voice. He said if I wanted to know how Thomas Cole died, I should come to the old Mercer access road. He said to bring the papers. Her fingers tightened around the mug. I thought maybe it was someone who wanted to help. But you were followed. 2 men, 1 truck. They tried to force me off before the curve. I remember headlights. Then the ditch. Then heat. Her voice thinned at the end. Ethan's anger moved quietly through him. Not the clean anger of battle, not something useful. This was older, heavier, braided with shame. Who else knows about the Thomas note? He asked. No one. Then, after a pause, whoever took the rest of my bag might now. Before Ethan could answer, headlights cut across the front window. Ranger was on his feet before the engine sound reached the porch. Lily flinched and grabbed the papers. Ethan motioned her back from the window. He killed the lantern, leaving only the stove glow, and moved to the side of the door. Ranger stood low beside him, silent. A vehicle stopped outside. 1 door opened. Mr. Cole? A man called. Young voice, trying for official and landing near nervous. Sheriff's Department. Lily's eyes widened. Ethan placed 1 finger to his lips, then opened the door before the man could step onto the porch. Deputy Owen Pike stood in the wash of his cruiser's headlights, hat in hand despite the cold. He was lean and a little under 6 feet, with short dark blonde hair flattened by his cap and a face too open to hide fear well. His uniform jacket was zipped wrong at the bottom, one side higher than the other. Not careless exactly. Rushed. Ethan stepped onto the porch and pulled the door nearly closed behind him. Deputy? Sorry to bother you this late. Owen's eyes went past Ethan to the narrow slit of warm light behind the door, then back. Sheriff Harlan asked me to check whether you made it to your father's place all right. That all? Owen swallowed. He also asked if you'd seen Lily Harper since the hospital. No. The lie was easy. Watching Owen hear it was harder. The young deputy looked down at his boots. Mud from the hospital lot had dried along the soles. His right thumb clicked the top of a metal pen in his jacket pocket once, twice, then stopped as if he caught himself. Harlan says she may be disoriented, Owen said. Is she? I wouldn't know.
You asking me or telling me? Owen's face flushed in the cold. I'm doing my job. Then do it. For a moment, Ethan thought Owen would ask to come inside. He saw the decision form and fail behind the deputy's eyes.
Owen was not corrupt in the way Harlan was. That much seemed clear. But fear could serve corruption just as well as greed. Owen shifted his weight. Your brother was a good man, he said suddenly. Ethan went still. Owen looked startled by his own words, as if they had slipped out before he could secure them. My dad used to say that, about Deputy Cole. Your dad know him? Everyone knew him. No, everyone knew of him. The correction landed. Owen looked toward the tree line. I was a kid when he died, he said. I remember the funeral procession. Whole town came out. Mercer paid for the flowers. Of course he did, Ethan thought. Owen took one step down from the porch, then stopped. If you find anything from the wreck, he said, voice lower, don't turn it in at the station. Ethan studied him. Owen kept his eyes on the cruiser, not on Ethan. Evidence gets logged, usually. Sometimes it gets misplaced before it reaches the right shelf. Is that a confession? It's advice. Why give it? The clicking pen started again inside Owen's pocket. Once, twice, 3 times. Because I saw the initial scene photos before Harlan pulled them from the shared drive. His voice barely carried above the wind. There was a second set of tire tracks near the bend. By the time I went back with a measuring kit, they were gone. Ethan said nothing. Owen's fear sharpened. I didn't say that. No. I was never here. You came to check on me. Yes. And I told you I haven't seen Lily Harper. Owen finally looked at him. Gratitude and shame sat together on his young face, neither comfortable with the other. Be careful, Mr. Cole. Then he walked back to the cruiser, got in, and turned around in the clearing. The headlights swept once over the cabin, over the leaning fence, over the porch where Ethan stood like part of the woodwork. Then the car disappeared down the track. Ethan waited until the sound faded. When he went back inside, Lily was standing near the table, clutching the plastic sleeve to her chest. He knows, she said. He suspects. That's not better. No. Ranger sniffed along the bottom of the door, then moved through the room, nose low. Ethan watched him. What is it? The dog did not answer, but he led them down the narrow hall toward the back of the cabin. Ethan followed with the flashlight. Lily stayed close, limping slightly now that adrenaline had worn thin. The hall ended at his father's study. Ethan had avoided opening that door. He turned the knob. The room beyond smelled different from the rest of the cabin. Less dust, more cold air. Papers lay scattered across the floor. Desk drawers hung open. A metal filing cabinet stood with its lock punched out. On the wall, pale rectangles showed where framed photographs had been removed. Lily whispered, "Someone was here." Ethan swept the flashlight across the room. Not random searching. Not kids. Not burglars looking for tools or cash. Someone had gone through records. The top drawer of the desk was empty, except for a single rusted paperclip and a dead moth. His father had kept property deeds there, insurance forms, old letters he pretended not to save. Ethan opened the cabinet. 2 folders remained. 3 had been taken, judging by the clean gaps in the dust. Ranger moved to the far corner and sniffed the floorboards, then looked back at Ethan. The window above the desk was closed, but not latched. Ethan opened it an inch. Cold air slipped in. The outside sill bore a faint scrape where a tool had lifted the latch. Lily stood very still in the doorway. "They knew I'd come looking for the Coles," she said. Ethan looked at the empty spaces on the wall. One photograph remained half hidden behind a fallen frame. Thomas in uniform, Ethan beside him at 19, both of them standing stiffly because their father had insisted on taking the picture. "They knew before I got here," Ethan said. He picked up the photograph. In the dusty glass, his younger self stared back at him with a face still untouched by most of what would come. Thomas stood beside him, smiling as if the town were worth saving. Behind Ethan, Ranger lay down across the study doorway. Not resting, blocking it. Lily noticed the gesture and did not step over him. The cabin had been meant to be a temporary shelter, a place to hide until morning. A place that belonged to Ethan by paperwork, not by heart. Now, it had become something else. A searched room. A missing history, a warning delivered before he even knew what question to ask. Ethan set the old photograph on the desk and looked at Lily's soot-smudged papers beside it. For the first time since crossing the red ash sign, he stopped thinking about leaving. Not because he wanted to stay, because someone had already made sure he could not walk away clean. By morning, Ethan had stopped thinking of the cabin as shelter. Shelter was a roof, a stove, a locked door, a place where an injured girl could sleep without waking at every sound. The cabin had all those things. It also had a broken window latch, missing files, and a study floor still marked by the footprints of someone who had searched before Ethan even knew what he was looking for. That made it something else. A compromised position. Lily slept for 2 hours on the couch because Nora Whitcomb had ordered it, and Ethan had enforced the order by setting a timer on his old military watch. When the alarm buzzed, she woke angry, which Ethan took as a good sign. "I know my name," she muttered before he asked. "Lily Harper. I know where I am. I know you're annoying." "Headache?" "Yes." "Worse?" "Everything is worse when someone wakes you up to ask if you're alive." "Vomiting?" "No." "Vision?" She opened one eye. "Still seeing you, unfortunately." Ranger, stretched across the doorway, thumped his tail once. Ethan let her sleep again after that. While she rested, he sat at his father's kitchen table and spread Sarah Harper's remaining papers under the gray dawn coming through the windows. Freight codes, license plate fragments, weight columns circled in careful pencil, dates that meant nothing alone and too much together. A few references to Thomas. One set of initials repeated in the margin. R.C. Ethan had spent much of his adult life turning fragments into maps. A boot print in dust. A change in radio chatter. A silence where a guard should have been. But military instinct was not admissible evidence. Suspicion did not reopen graves. A dead woman's notes would not save Lily if Harlan decided to make her a confused suspect, a thief, or a danger to herself. He needed someone who could read the paper trail without pretending it was a battlefield. So he called Marcus Donnelly. Mac answered on the 5th ring with a voice like gravel and bad coffee. "If this is about money, I died last Tuesday." "You still alive enough to work?" There was a pause. Then the dry humor thinned. "Ethan?" "Yeah?" "Hell, I thought you'd forgotten phones had outgoing calls." "I need help." Mac did not make the mistake of asking if Ethan was sure. Ethan gave him the short version. Red Ash, the wreck, Lily Harper, Sarah's files, Thomas's name, Harlan, Mercer Freight. On the other end, Mac stayed quiet long enough for Ethan to hear a chair creak and the faint clatter of a keyboard. Marcus Mac Donnelly had once been Navy intelligence, though he looked more like a tired mechanic than a man who could find a pattern buried under 6 layers of bureaucracy. In Ethan's mind, Mac was still broad-faced, red-haired, sharp-eyed, always carrying a dented steel coffee mug as if it were mission-critical equipment. The war had left him with a bad back, a worse sleep schedule, and a talent for being useful while never leaving his den. "Send me pictures," Mac said. "I've got paper. Some of it burned, some copied." "Send what you have. Don't expect miracles." "I don't." "You do. You just don't call them that." Ethan photographed each page with Lily's phone because his own was too old to cooperate with anything more complicated than a call. When Mac received the images, he made a low sound through his teeth. "These are partials," he said. "Old manifests, handwritten notes, maybe internal routing codes. No chain of custody, no source verification. If you hand this to a federal desk right now, it dies in a pile." "That's why I called." "I can try to match codes against public business filings, DOT records, shell companies, maybe archived freight registrations. But if Mercer kept their real books offline or buried in local systems, this won't crack anything by itself." "What will?" "Original records, a living witness, or current activity using the same codes." Ethan looked at the initials in Sarah's handwriting. R.C. "What about a name?" "Depends on the name." R.C. Mac sighed. "That is not a name. That is 2 letters wearing a hat." "It's all I've got." "Then find someone old enough to remember who wore the hat." Lily was awake by then, sitting up with Nora's borrowed coat around her shoulders, listening. "I know someone," she said. Ethan lowered the phone. "Who?" "June Calloway." The name meant little to Ethan until she added, "She worked county records before I did. 30 years, maybe more. My grandmother said June knew where every buried page in Red Ash had gone." "Would she talk to you?" Lily looked toward the fire. "She used to cross the street to avoid me after I started asking about my mother." "That's not promising." "No," Lily said. "But people avoid you differently when they know you almost died." June Calloway lived on the east side of town, in a narrow white house squeezed between a laundromat and an empty lot where a feed store had burned years earlier. Ethan drove there by back roads, avoiding Main Street, though avoiding anything in Red Ash was mostly an illusion. Curtains shifted as his truck passed. A man pumping gas turned his head too slowly. A woman outside the pharmacy stopped mid-conversation and watched Nora's blue coat in the passenger seat. By noon, Lily's name was everywhere. They heard it before they saw it. At a stop sign near the courthouse, the television inside a diner played loud enough for the words to spill through the open door as a busboy took out trash. "Authorities are seeking Lily Harper, 24, for questioning after she left Red Ash Community Hospital late last night against medical advice. Sheriff Wade Harlan says Ms. Harper may be confused following a serious motor vehicle accident and urges residents not to approach her but to contact local law enforcement." Lily stared straight ahead. Ethan kept the truck moving. "Not a warrant," he said. "No, just a leash." Her voice was flat, but her hands had folded into fists. A second segment followed on a different screen in the window of the hardware store as they passed. Grant Mercer stood at a podium in front of the high school gym, silver hair immaculate, navy overcoat tailored to make generosity look expensive. He spoke with grave concern, one hand pressed lightly to his chest. "Lily Harper is a young woman who has suffered greatly. Our family is praying for her safe return and stands ready to assist law enforcement in any way we can." Ranger growled softly from the back seat. Lily did not. That was worse. June Calloway did not open the door when Lily knocked. A curtain moved. "Ms. Calloway?" Lily called, her voice still rough from smoke.
"It's Lily Harper. I need to ask about my mother." Silence. Ethan stood 3 steps back from the porch, not wanting to crowd the old woman. Ranger sat beside him, calm and upright, his old leather collar visible against his thick fur. A thin voice came through the door. "Go away." "I can't." "You can. You just won't." "Someone tried to kill me last night." The curtain moved again. "That is exactly why you should go away." Lily flinched as if the door itself had struck her. Ethan stepped forward then, but not all the way. "Mrs. Calloway," he said, "my name is Ethan Cole." The silence changed, not opened, changed. "Thomas's brother?" the voice asked. "Yes." A bolt slid back, then another. The door opened the width of a chain. June Calloway peered out with one sharp brown eye. She was small, silver-haired, and bent slightly at the shoulders, but nothing about her seemed fragile. Her cardigan was buttoned wrong, and a pencil was tucked behind one ear, as if she had been interrupted in the middle of correcting the world. Behind her, the house was stacked with books, file boxes, newspapers, and framed photographs crowded on every surface. Her gaze moved from Ethan's clean-shaven face to Ranger. The dog did not approach. He only lowered his head a little, amber eyes steady. June's expression shifted. "My husband had a dog after Kay-san," she said. "Not like that one. Meaner. Or maybe just sadder." "Ranger's retired," Ethan said. "Aren't we all?" She shut the door. The chain scraped. When she opened it again, the gap was wide enough to enter. "You get 10 minutes," she said. "If anyone asks, you were never here." Inside, June's house smelled of paper, lavender soap, and old coffee. Every room seemed to have surrendered to records. Books were stacked on chairs. Newspaper clippings lay under glass paperweights. A typewriter sat on a side table beneath a framed photograph of a young Marine in dress blues. June caught Ethan looking. "My husband," she said. "Daniel Calloway. Came home from Vietnam with half his hearing and none of his patience for liars." Ranger moved to the photo, sniffed the frame once, then lay down beside the front door as if he had understood the house rules. June noticed. Her face softened only for a moment. "Say what you came to say," she told Lily. Lily took out Sarah's copied pages. June did not touch them at first. She adjusted her glasses, bent over the table, and read as if every line had weight. The longer she read, the older she seemed. "Where did you get these?" "My grandmother kept them." "Grace should have burned them." "She didn't." "No," June whispered. "She wouldn't." Ethan leaned against the wall near the hall, where he could see both front and back entrances. It was habit, but June noticed that too. "You stand like Thomas," she said. "No, ma'am." "Don't ma'am me. I'm not dead yet." Lily almost smiled. June pointed to one of the freight manifests. "This code here, M-17. It was listed as aggregate shipment, road material, gravel, stone, harmless things men in clean shirts use to hide dirty things." She tapped another page. "But the weights don't match the fuel logs. Too light going out, too heavy coming back. Then the invoice gets corrected after the quarter closes." "Money laundering?" Ethan asked. "At first, I thought insurance fraud. Sarah did too." June looked at Lily. "Your mother came to me because she wanted copies of old filings. Quiet copies.
She said Mercer Freight was billing through companies that didn't have employees, equipment, or offices. Shell companies, Lily said. June nodded. Then Sarah found passenger weight. The room stilled. She didn't call it that at first, June continued. She thought maybe unregistered workers, men being moved for labor. Then she found notes about women and children. Not names, numbers. Pickups along routes that never appeared on official schedules. Her mouth tightened. People hidden inside shipments marked building materials. Lily's face changed, not with surprise, but with the pain of a fear confirmed. Ethan thought of the burning car, the red bands on Lily's wrists. A town built by men who moved things no one counted. Thomas knew? He asked. June's eyes moved to him. Thomas was the only deputy Sarah trusted. Wade Harlan was a deputy then, but he was already Grant Mercer's man. Everyone knew it if they wanted to know. Her voice sharpened. Most people preferred not to. Why didn't Thomas take it outside? He tried. June's hand trembled as she reached for a stack of index cards bound with a rubber band. He asked me for records of evidence transfers. Not officially. He said he needed to know which files had gone missing before he accused anyone. He and Sarah were going to meet a reporter. RC? Lily asked. June looked up. The pencil behind her ear slipped and fell to the table. Where did you see that? In my mother's notes. June sat down slowly. The old chair creaked under her. Ruth Caldwell, she said. Red Ash Gazette. Best reporter this town ever wasted. What happened to her? Ethan asked. She vanished after Sarah died. Some said she ran because she'd lied. Some said Mercer paid her. Both were easier to believe than fear. June's eyes hardened. She was writing about the freight lines. Thomas was supposed to bring her something. He died first. Sarah died after. Ruth disappeared before the paper could print a word. Lily sat very still. Both cases were handled by Harlan? Ethan asked. Harlan, Sheriff Bell, County Coroner Voss, and a district attorney who retired 6 months later with a lake house he could not afford. June's voice carried old disgust. Thomas's death was written as a hunting accident before the blood dried. Sarah's as suicide before they dragged the car out of the lake. Ethan felt the room tilt slightly, though he did not move. He had hated Red Ash for letting Thomas die. He had not understood that the town had helped write the manner of his death. Lily reached toward the little key at her throat, then lowered her hand. Why didn't you say anything? June looked at her, and for the first time her sharpness broke. Because I was afraid. No excuse followed. The honesty was uglier without one. My husband was already sick, June said. Mercer owned the company that paid his insurance. I had a daughter in college. Then Thomas died. Then your mother. Then Ruth vanished. She swallowed. Cowardice is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like showing up to work and filing the paper where someone tells you to file it. Lily looked down. Ethan expected anger. She had earned it. Instead, she said, Do you have anything left? June closed her eyes. Then she stood. The back room of her house had once been a sewing room. Now it was an archive of things that should not exist. June pulled a hat box from behind folded quilts and opened it with careful hands. Inside were photocopies, handwritten notes, old courthouse request slips, and a yellowed envelope marked with 3 letters. R.C. I kept only what I could hide from myself, June said. Not enough to save them. Maybe enough to point you towards someone who can. Ethan looked at the envelope. Ruth Caldwell, a woman who had vanished before the truth could speak. June placed the envelope in Lily's hands, then seemed to regret letting go of it. Before anyone could speak, Ranger rose near the front door, his head angled toward the street. A vehicle slowed outside. Ethan killed the lamp with one hand. June moved faster than her age suggested, sweeping papers back into the hatbox. Lily stepped away from the window. The vehicle did not stop. Its tires whispered over wet pavement, paused at the corner, then continued. Ranger remained standing until the sound was gone. June's face had gone gray. "They still watch?" Lily asked. June laughed once. It had no humor in it. "Child, they never stopped. They just got better at making it look like neighbors." Ethan checked the front window from the side. The street was empty. "We should go," he said. June nodded. "Yes." "You too." "No." Ethan turned. "You just gave us evidence." "I gave you copies, and I am done running from my own house." "That's pride." "That's age. They look similar from a distance." Lily gripped the envelope. "Miss Calloway, I know what I am risking." June's voice softened. "Your mother came to me once with you in her arms. You were asleep against her shoulder. She asked if I thought Red Ash could ever become a decent place. I told her towns don't become anything. People do." Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. "Then I spent 16 years proving myself wrong." She walked them to the side door. At the threshold, she bent slowly and held out her hand to Ranger. Ethan almost warned her not to, but Ranger lowered his head and touched his muzzle to her palm. June closed her fingers briefly in the fur beneath his jaw. "Good old soldier," she whispered. Ranger's tail moved once. They left by the alley. Ethan drove without headlights for the first block, then turned down a service road behind the laundromat. Lily held June's envelope in her lap, as if it were alive. "Ruth Caldwell," she said. "Mac can start there." "Do you think she's alive?" "I think if she wanted to be found, she would have been." "That's not an answer." "No, it's the one I have." His phone buzzed before she could respond. Mac. Ethan put him on speaker. "I hate your town," Mac said. "You've been looking for 10 minutes. Well, and it took me 3 to hate it." Mercer Freight had subsidiaries that dissolved and reappeared under new names every few years. Some of the old routing codes from your girl's papers show up in recent state inspection records. "How recent?" "Last month." Lily turned toward the phone. Mac continued. "Same structure, cleaner paperwork. Mercer Materials now, not Mercer Freight. Quarry access, warehouse permits, leased trucks. I can't prove what they're moving, but whatever Sarah Harper saw didn't die with Sarah Harper." Ethan looked at the road ahead. A thin column of smoke rose beyond the rooftops. At first he thought it was a chimney. Then Ranger began to bark. Lily twisted in her seat. "Ethan!" The smoke thickened, black against the pale afternoon sky, coming from the east side of town, from June Calloway's street. Ethan turned the truck hard enough for the tires to scream. By the time they reached the house, flames had eaten through the back porch and climbed the kitchen wall. Neighbors stood on sidewalks in coats and slippers, watching with the helpless fascination of people grateful the fire had chosen someone else. Sirens wailed somewhere too far away. Ethan was out before the truck stopped. "Stay here," he told Lily. "No, stay." For once, she did. Ranger followed Ethan to the yard, barking toward the front of the house. Smoke poured under the eaves. The front door was open, but heat rolled from it in waves. "June!" Ethan shouted. A weak pounding answered from inside. Not the front, the back room. Ethan grabbed the wool blanket from the truck bed, soaked it under a garden spigot that barely worked, and wrapped it over his shoulders. Ranger paced at the edge of the porch, frantic but controlled, unwilling to abandon the door and unable to enter the heat. "Back," Ethan ordered. The dog obeyed with visible fury. Inside, the house was a maze of smoke and falling paper. Burning pages lifted and curled in the air like black birds. Ethan kept low, one forearm over his mouth, following the pounding. The hallway wall had caught. Heat stung his eyes. June lay near the sewing room door, coughing, one hand clutching the leg of an overturned table. A fallen shelf had pinned her skirt and trapped her foot beneath scattered boxes. Ethan lifted the shelf, freed her, and pulled her into his arms. "No," she rasped. "The hat box." "Not dying for paper." "Already did," she coughed. 16 years. He carried her out through the front as the kitchen window burst behind him. The volunteer fire truck arrived as he reached the yard. Lily ran to June, Nora's blue coat flaring behind her. June's face was streaked with soot, her breathing ragged. But she was alive. "My papers," June whispered. Lily looked at the house. The room where June had hidden her past was burning brightest. Ethan knelt beside Ranger, one hand gripping the dog's collar, more to steady himself than the animal. Ranger pressed against him, chest heaving. June caught Lily's hand with surprising strength. "I was afraid before," she said. Lily bent close to hear. June's eyes, red from smoke, fixed on the flames consuming her house. "But I am not going to be silent this time." The old church stood beyond the last road maintained by the county. Once, it had served the mining families who lived in the hills above Red Ash, back when men came home with stone dust in their hair, and hymns were sung by women who knew which cough meant winter and which meant widowhood. Now the steeple leaned slightly to the east. One half of the stained glass window above the doors had cracked into a spider web of blue and amber. The sign out front still read St. Mark's, though someone had shot out the letter A years ago. Ethan parked behind the building, where the trees hid the truck from the road. June Calloway sat in the back seat, wrapped in a blanket from the ambulance crew, refusing to go to the hospital with the same fierce politeness she had once used to refuse death. Her hair smelled of smoke. Her hands shook when she thought no one was looking. Lily kept one arm around her as they moved through the rear entrance and down into the basement. Ranger followed last. The dog was limping more now. Ethan noticed the stiffness in the rear leg, the way Ranger lowered his weight carefully on each step. He said nothing at first, because there were moments when naming pain made it larger. But when they reached the basement, a low, dry room smelling of dust, old hymnals, and stone, he spread his own field jacket on the floor near the wall and pointed. "Down." Ranger stared at him. "Don't start." The German shepherd stood a second longer out of principle, then lowered himself onto the jacket with a slow exhale. The notch in his right ear flicked once. His amber eyes remained fixed on the stairs. Even exhausted, he chose the door. June watched him from a folding chair Ethan had found stacked under a tarp. "He thinks he's still on duty," she murmured. "He is," Ethan said. "That why you love him?" The question came from the smoke-sore quiet of a woman too old to waste words. Ethan checked the small basement windows before answering. "He stayed when I didn't know how." June's face softened in a way that made Lily look away. They had no electricity, but Mac had told Ethan the church's old bell tower gave decent reception if he stood near the east wall. That, Mac said, was either divine intervention or proof that cell towers had no respect for theology. Ethan called him while Lily helped June wash soot from her hands with bottled water. Mac answered with no greeting. "I found Ruth Caldwell." Ethan stepped farther from the others. "Alive?" "Depends how philosophical you want to get. Legally? No. Socially? Definitely no. Digitally? Almost impressive." "Where?" "Trailer settlement near the Idaho line. Not official enough to be a town, not lawless enough to be interesting. She's using the name Ruth Bell. No utilities in her name, no active bank cards, no driver's license renewal in 11 years. She pays cash and buys prepaid minutes from a gas station that still sells bait from a freezer." "You sure it's her?" "I found an old property tax mailing forwarded twice before it disappeared. Then a clinic record for a woman matching her age, with an emergency contact crossed out hard enough to tear the form. Also, I am gifted." "You're limited." "I am gifted within limits." Mac's voice changed. "Ethan, listen. If she's been hiding this well for 16 years, she won't welcome company. Not expecting tea. Expect a gun." Ethan looked toward the corner where Lily was kneeling beside June. "I'll go alone." "No," Lily said immediately. He had not realized she was listening. June coughed, then wiped her mouth with a cloth. "Of course you were going to say that." "It's safer," Ethan said. "For who?" Lily asked. "For you." "That answer is getting old. You were in a burning car yesterday, and my mother was in a lake for 16 years while everyone chose safer." The basement went quiet. Ethan looked at her. There was no heat in Lily's face now, no dramatic anger, just a steadiness that had cost her something. She was pale, bruised, wrapped in a borrowed coat, and still standing in front of him as if fear no longer excused obedience. Ranger lifted his head from the jacket. Lily turned to the dog, and her expression shifted. Not softer exactly, but more open. "I'll come back," she told him. The words were simple, too simple for what they carried. Ranger held her gaze. His tail moved once against Ethan's jacket. It was the first time Ethan had heard Lily promise return to anyone. He looked away before the moment became something he would have to answer for. They left June in the church basement with food, water, Ethan's spare phone, and Ranger lying across the stairwell like an old guardian, carved from fur and discipline. June insisted she was fine. Then she asked for a pencil and the envelope marked RC, which told Ethan she was not fine at all and had chosen work over fear. The drive toward the Idaho line took nearly 2 hours. Lily said little. The road narrowed after the highway, passing through open country where snow gathered in fence shadows and abandoned barns leaned into the wind. Ethan did not push her to speak. Silence between them had changed. It was no longer only suspicion or distance. It had become a temporary agreement. Neither of them had enough strength to pretend. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "Did Thomas ever talk about my mother?" "No." "Would he have told you if he was helping her?" Ethan kept his eyes on the road. "Back then? Maybe. If I'd been someone worth telling." "You were his brother." "I was angry. That's not the same thing as being available." Lily turned the little silver key at her throat between thumb and forefinger. "My grandmother used to say, grief makes people selfish." She was right. "That bother you?" "Truth usually does." They reached the trailer settlement near late afternoon. It sat in a shallow bowl of land behind a closed auto salvage yard, a scatter of old trailers, tarped roofs, propane tanks, dead washing machines, and vehicles that might run if spoken to kindly. A few dogs barked from chains. A woman smoking outside a trailer watched Ethan's truck pass but did not wave. The place felt less hidden, then discarded. Mac's directions led them to a beige trailer at the far edge of the settlement, backed against a stand of winter bare cottonwoods. Wind moved plastic sheeting over one broken window. A rusted satellite dish pointed at nothing. Before Ethan killed the engine, the trailer door opened. A woman stood there with a shotgun. She was thin and tall, her body folded inward by age, but not weakness. Her hair, once brown, had gone mostly silver and was cut unevenly around her jaw, as if mirrors were luxuries she resented. Her face was sharp, all cheekbones and guarded eyes behind thick glasses repaired with tape at one hinge. She wore a faded parka over a gray sweater, one fingerless glove on her left hand. The shotgun did not tremble. "Turn around," she called. Ethan kept his hands visible on the wheel. "Ruth Caldwell?" The barrel lifted half an inch. "Wrong woman. Sarah Harper sent you records." The woman's face changed so quickly, it was almost painful. Lily opened her door before Ethan could stop her. "My name is Lily Harper." "Get back in the truck," Ethan said. Lily ignored him, stepping into the cold with both hands visible. "Sarah was my mother." The woman with the shotgun stared at her. For a moment, 16 years seemed to stand between them in the yard, thin and smoking like a burned page. Then Ruth Caldwell said, "No." It was not denial. It was grief recognizing a face it had never expected to see grown. The gun lowered, but only slightly. "She had a little girl," Ruth whispered. "I'm not little anymore." "No," Ruth said. "I suppose they made sure of that." Inside the trailer, heat came from a small propane stove, and every curtain was pinned shut. The air smelled of kerosene, dust, and canned soup. Books were stacked in milk crates. Newspaper clippings filled shoeboxes under a narrow table. A manual typewriter sat beneath a cloth, as if hidden from accusation. Ruth did not offer them seats. She locked the door behind them, checked the window twice, and kept the shotgun within reach. "You shouldn't have come," she said. "People keep telling me that," Lily replied. "Because people with sense recognize traps." Ethan stood near the kitchenette, where he could see the door and the hall. "Were you followed?" Ruth gave him a look sharp enough to cut paper. "I have stayed alive for 16 years because I ask that question before I breathe." "You Ruth Caldwell?" he asked. "I was." "Ethan Cole." "I know." Her eyes flicked over his face, the clean jaw, the gray-blue eyes, the controlled stillness. "You look less like Thomas than I expected." "People keep saying the opposite." "They remember wrong. He was warmer." The statement landed without cruelty. That made it worse. Lily stepped forward. "What happened to my mother?" Ruth's mouth tightened. "The short version," she said. "She trusted the truth to move faster than money. It didn't." Lily flinched, but did not step back. Ruth removed her glasses, cleaned them on the hem of her sweater, and sat at the table as if her legs had finally told the truth about her fear. "Sarah found discrepancies in Mercer Freight's records. At first she thought it was fraud. Billing, insurance, fake companies. That was enough to scare a normal person. Sarah was not normal." A ghost of admiration moved through her voice. She kept digging. She found references to pickups that never appeared on legal routes. Weight changes no gravel shipment could explain. People being counted as cargo without names. "And Thomas?" Ethan asked. "Thomas was trying to get proof Harlan was feeding Mercer information. He was supposed to bring me copies from inside the sheriff's office." Ethan's hands closed slowly at his sides. "Did he?"
"No." Ruth looked at him. "He died the morning of our meeting." The propane heater clicked. Outside, wind dragged something metallic against the trailer skirt. Ruth continued. "Sarah panicked after Thomas died, but she didn't stop. She gave me partial accounting records and said she had a second set hidden. We were going to print enough to force state attention. My editor, Leonard Price, agreed to hold the story until we had one more confirmation." "What happened to him?" Lily asked, though her face suggested she already knew the pattern. "Car accident. 2 nights after Sarah's funeral." Ruth looked at the covered typewriter. "By then I understood the arithmetic. Thomas, Sarah, Leonard. 3 warnings. I ran before I became the 4th. "And you left my mother's name buried," Lily said.
Ruth accepted the blow. Yes. No defense, no speech about survival, only the word. Lily's eyes shone, but her voice remained steady. "Do you have proof?" Ruth laughed once. "Everyone wants proof after the dead are safe to pity." Ethan said, "Do you?" Ruth studied him, perhaps deciding whether his coldness was strength or damage. Then she stood and went to the back of the trailer. When she returned, she carried an old radio with cracked plastic casing, a cassette tape in a yellow sleeve, and a small hard drive wrapped in cloth. "I don't have the whole truth," she said. "I have pieces I was too afraid to destroy and too afraid to use." She turned the radio over, removed 2 screws with a table knife, and opened the back panel. The hard drive had been hidden inside the hollow space, taped beneath the speaker. "Mercer thought Leonard had everything," Ruth said. "When he died, they believed the story died with him. I let them think it. Then I became Ruth Bell, paid cash, stopped writing, and spent 16 years listening for tires on gravel." Lily reached for the cassette, but Ruth held it a moment longer. "There are voices on this," Ruth said. "Grant Mercer, Wade Harlan. One other man I never identified. They talk about Sarah, not by full name, enough to know, not enough to convict. If it had been enough, I tell myself, I would have used it." "Would you have?" Lily asked. Ruth's hand shook then. "No." The honesty seemed to drain the small room of air. Ruth placed the tape in Lily's hand. Lily looked at it as if it were bone. Ethan called Mac from Ruth's table. It took 20 minutes to rig Ruth's old cassette player through Lily's phone so Mac could capture the audio. The recording hissed and wavered, voices buried under static and the low mechanical breath of an old machine. Grant Mercer's voice came through first, younger but unmistakable in its smooth authority. "Numbers are one thing, names are another." Then Harlan, rougher, impatient, "She won't let it go." A third voice murmured something too faint to catch. Grant again. "Then handle Sarah before she takes those numbers outside town." Lily sat very still. Ruth turned away. The tape continued, but the rest dissolved into static, fragments, chair noise, a door closing, someone saying the word shipment, and then nothing clear enough to trust. Mac came back on the line after a long silence. "It's bad," he said. "Useful?" Ethan asked. "Emotionally? Yes. Legally? Not alone. Old tape, no original chain, no date stamp, partial names, unclear context. A good defense lawyer will turn it into smoke." Lily looked at the cassette. "That's what they always do." "I'm not saying it's worthless," Mac said, gentler now. "I'm saying it needs a spine. Current records, live witness, something tying the same people or their successors to the same pattern now." "What about the hard drive?" Ethan asked. "I can try." "But if it's been sitting in a radio for 16 years, don't expect a confession with a bow on it." Ruth handed Ethan the drive as if it burned. Mac worked remotely through a borrowed cable Ruth had kept in a drawer full of dead electronics. The first scan failed. The second read only fragments. File names appeared in broken strings, half-corrupted dates and codes that made Lily lean closer. M17, she said. That was in my mother's notes. Mac's tone sharpened. Say that again? M17 and Q-Bridge. I saw both in the manifests. I found Q-Bridge in a current logistics shell 3 hours ago. Different company name, same routing pattern. Victor Salazar owns the parent. Who is Victor Salazar? Ethan asked. Not local. Runs a freight brokerage out of Washington on paper. In reality, his companies appear wherever cargo needs to move without questions. Mercer isn't the whole machine. Mercer is the clean local dock. Ruth closed her eyes. So it never stopped. No, Lily said. The words were quiet, but they changed the room more than shouting would have. For 16 years, Lily had chased the truth of her mother's death. She had wanted a grave corrected, a name restored, a lie undone. Now the lie had opened into a living wound, and somewhere, people were still being counted as cargo. Ethan saw the realization settle on her shoulders. He had watched recruits feel that weight for the first time, the moment a mission stopped being abstract and became faces not yet seen. Lily looked at him. We can't just prove what happened to my mother. No, Ethan said. Ruth gave a thin, broken laugh. You sound like Sarah. Mac cleared his throat through the phone. I know someone. Ethan looked down at the screen. No. You don't even know who. I know the sound of that sentence. Carla Mendez, FBI. She was sniffing around missing person patterns tied to freight corridors a few years back. Smart, stubborn, allergic to sloppy evidence. Which means she'll hate all of you at first. Can she be trusted? Lily asked. No one should be trusted, but she can be verified, which is better. Ruth shook her head. Federal attention will bring Mercer down on everyone. Mercer already burned June's house, Ethan said. And if they know I'm alive? Ruth asked. No one answered. Mac said, Mendez won't move on ghost stories. She'll want current proof. Time, location, images, records, witnesses. Something live enough that no local sheriff can bury it before morning. Lily looked at the hard drive, then at the cassette, then toward the trailer window where fading light pressed against the curtains. So we have the past, she said. Ethan heard what she did not say. And now we need the present. They left Ruth's trailer after dark. Ruth refused to come with them. Not from cowardice this time, she said, but calculation. If she vanished from the settlement the same day Ethan arrived, anyone watching old trails would know she mattered. She would wait until Mac arranged a safer extraction, or until Ethan had something worth risking her testimony for. At the door, Lily turned back. My mother trusted you, she said. Ruth's face folded around the words. I know. That's not forgiveness. I know that, too. Lily nodded once and stepped into the cold. The drive back to the church was darker than the drive out. Ethan kept to secondary roads. Lily held the cassette in both hands, the little silver key at her throat resting against its plastic case. She did not cry. Ethan thought crying might have been easier to sit beside. When they reached St. Mark's, Ranger was waiting at the basement stairs. He rose slowly when Lily entered. You stayed, she said to him. Ranger stepped forward and pressed his head against her hip. Lily bent over him, one hand burying itself in the thick fur of his neck. For a moment, with June asleep in a pew cushion beside the wall and Ethan standing in the damp stone room, Lily let herself lean some of her weight into the old dog. Not much. Enough. Ethan looked away and called Mac again. This time, a woman's voice joined after 2 rings. controlled and crisp. "Marcus Donnelly says you have information related to freight-linked disappearances and possible official corruption in Montana," she said. "This is Special Agent Carla Mendez." Ethan looked at Lily. Lily straightened, still holding the cassette. "We have old evidence," Ethan said, "and a living witness." "That starts a conversation," Mendez replied. "It does not start an operation." Her voice had no warmth, but it had a tension. "What do you need?" Ethan asked. "Current proof, a date, a place, images I can authenticate, a witness I can put in front of a prosecutor, and a direct link to Mercer infrastructure. Without that, all you have is tragedy." Lily's face hardened. Ethan understood the difference now. Tragedy was what towns buried. Evidence was what forced them to dig. Mendez continued, "Mr. Cole, if what Donnelly says is true, you are standing near something larger than one old murder. Do not improvise. Do not play soldier. Bring me something I can use, or stay alive long enough for someone else to." The line went quiet. In the basement of a dead church, with smoke still in June's hair, an old dog limping beside a girl who had been written off as unstable, Ethan looked at the cassette tape from 16 years ago and understood the price of moving forward. They could no longer win by proving the dead had been wronged. They had to catch the living in the act. The rain began before dark. It moved in from the west in long gray curtains, flattening the pine tops and turning the churchyard to black mud. By evening, water ran down the broken stained glass at St. Mark's and dripped steadily into a rusted baptismal font someone had dragged beneath the leak years ago. Mac called just after 6. Ethan stood in the bell tower, with one shoulder against the old stone wall, phone pressed to his ear, watching the road below disappear under rain. "Mercer has a transfer tonight," Mac said. Ethan did not answer at once. Behind him, the old bell hung silent in its frame, green with age. Downstairs, June slept in the basement, with a blanket over her knees and a notebook open in her lap. Lily was sorting through her mother's copied codes by lantern light. Ranger lay near the stairwell, awake but still, his injured rear leg stretched carefully to one side. "When?" Ethan asked. "Between 11 and midnight, Mercer Quarry, not the public gate. Service road on the north side. The shipment is listed as precast drainage pipe, but the routing code matches Q-Bridge and M17. Same pattern Ruth's Drive coughed up. Could be a decoy. Could be. Could also be the first live thread we've had." Ethan looked through the rain toward the unseen town. "What does Mendez say?" "She says if you get verifiable footage, container ID, license plates, and anything showing human cargo or forced movement, she can push for immediate intervention. She has a team within range, but she won't burn them on a hunch." "That's cautious." "That's law." "Law has been late." "Late is not the same as useless." Ethan closed his eyes for 1 second. He could hear Thomas's name in the silence between the rain and Mac's breathing. He could hear Lily downstairs, turning pages that her mother had died for. He could hear Ranger shift his weight, old bones against stone. "I'll go," Ethan said. "You won't go alone." "I wasn't asking." "Good. Because I wasn't asking either." When Ethan returned to the basement, Lily already knew. She read it in his face before he spoke. "No," he said. She stood from the table. "You don't even know what I'm going to say." "I do." "No, you know what you want me to say." June opened her eyes from her chair, watching without interrupting. Ethan set the phone on the table beside Sarah Harper's pages.
Mac found a transfer tonight at Mercer Quarry. I'm going to record it and send it to Mendez. I'm coming. No. Lily laughed once, short and empty. There it is. You're concussed, burned, and wanted by half the town. I can read the codes. I can photograph a container. You can photograph the wrong one. The words stopped him. Lily stepped closer, one hand resting on the table where her mother's notes lay protected beneath a plastic sleeve. Her face was still bruised from the crash. Her voice was not. My mother used shorthand in those records.
She marked altered manifests differently from copied ones. Q-Bridge isn't just a route, it's a transfer sequence. M17 only matters if it appears with a weight correction after the gate scan. If you go without me, you might film trucks and rain and men in jackets. You might miss the one thing that proves the old pattern is still alive. Ethan looked at June. The old woman's expression said she did not like it. It also said Lily was right. I didn't pull you out of a burning car so you could walk into a quarry full of men who tried to put you there, Ethan said. Lily's eyes hardened. And I didn't survive that car so you could decide the rest of my life belongs to your judgment. The basement fell quiet, except for rain tapping the stones. Ranger rose slowly. He limped to Lily, then stopped between her and Ethan, not choosing a side so much as occupying the space where anger might have crossed into something worse. Lily lowered her hand to his head. Ranger leaned into her touch for half a breath. Ethan watched the gesture. Something in him gave way. Not surrender, not agreement, but recognition. Lily was no longer only the girl from the wreck. Maybe she never had been. You follow my instructions, he said. I'll listen to them. That's not the same thing. It's what you get. June made a dry sound from her chair. She sounds like her mother. Lily looked over, startled. June closed her notebook. Sarah was not fearless. People always say that about the dead when they want to make courage sound clean. She was terrified most of the time. She went anyway. No one spoke after that for a while. Then Ethan began to plan. They used what they had. Lily's phone for video, Ethan's older phone for calls, a small camera Mac had convinced Ethan to keep in his truck years ago, 2 battery packs, dark rain gear, a flashlight with a red filter, and Owen Pike's number, which Ethan had not intended to use until it became necessary. It became necessary at 9:15. A message arrived from an unknown number. Video attached. No text. The video was grainy traffic footage from the road near the crash site. It showed Lily's car entering the curve in rainless darkness 2 nights earlier. 5 seconds later, a dark pickup without plates appeared behind it. Too close, angling hard. The pickup struck Lily's rear quarter panel once, then again. Her car vanished off the road. Ethan watched it twice. Lily watched it once and turned away. A second message followed. Harlan ordered the original removed. I copied it before he locked the drive. I can't do more from inside. Don't trust the station. Ethan typed back only one word. Where? The answer came after a long minute. Northgate camera blind after 10:40. Quarry workers told to stay off-site. Harlan meeting Mercer there. Then, I'm sorry. Lily read the words over Ethan's shoulder. Is sorry enough? She asked. No. Is it something? Ethan looked at the video frozen on her car being pushed toward the ditch. It's a start. Mercer Quarry was not abandoned. That was why it worked. By day, trucks carried gravel, concrete forms, pipe sections, and pallets of construction material through the south gate. Men clocked in. Invoices were printed. Dust rose. Clipboards moved from office to office. Everything had just enough legitimacy to dull suspicion. By night, the north side became something else. Ethan parked half a mile out beneath the trees. Rain hammered the roof of the truck. Beyond the windshield, the quarry lights glowed weakly through mist, pale yellow pools scattered across black stone. The old pit dropped beyond the service road, its terraced walls slick with rainwater. Idle machinery hunched in the dark. Loaders, conveyors, a rusted crusher with its jaws open like an animal too old to hunt. Ranger shifted in the back seat. "You should have stayed with June," Ethan said. The dog looked at him. Lily, tightening the hood of her rain jacket, said, "That sounded like something you knew he'd ignore." "He listens when he wants to." "So do I." Ethan gave her a look. For the first time since the hospital, Lily almost smiled. The moment did not last. They moved through the trees without lights, rain masking sound but turning every step dangerous. Ethan led, Ranger behind him, Lily following with the phone sealed in a plastic bag against her chest. She moved slower than she wanted to, but she did not complain. At the edge of the old equipment yard, they crouched behind a row of stacked drainage pipes. Headlights appeared beyond the north gate. One truck, then another, then 3 more. Mac's voice whispered through Ethan's earpiece. "Signal's weak, but I've got you. Mendez is monitoring. She needs clear IDs." "Working on it," Ethan murmured. The first truck rolled beneath a security light. Lily zoomed in on the plate. Ethan filmed the container number. Rain blurred everything. He wiped the lens with his sleeve and tried again. Men in dark jackets moved around the trucks. One carried a clipboard. Another held an umbrella over a man stepping from a black SUV. Even at a distance, Grant Mercer looked untouched by the weather. Silver hair, long dark coat, one hand tucked into a leather glove. He did not hurry. Men like Grant Mercer made other people hurry for them. A second SUV arrived. Wade Harlan got out. Lily's breath caught. Ethan did not look at her. "Keep filming." "I am." The container doors on the second truck opened. At first, Ethan saw only darkness inside. Then movement. A hand. A face. Someone being pulled down by a man in a rain slicker. Lily's phone trembled. Ethan steadied her wrist with 2 fingers, not taking the device from her. "Breathe," he said. She did. One person climbed out, then another, then several more, hunched against the rain, moving stiffly after hours in confinement. Men, women, 2 teenagers. No one spoke loudly. Fear had its own discipline. Mac's voice sharpened. "Tell me you're getting this." "We are," Ethan said. Lily zoomed in on the container marking. Her whole body went still. "M17, she whispered. "Weight correction after gate scan. That's it. That's my mother's sequence." Ethan felt the words move through him like a door opening. Not memory now. Proof. Lily kept filming, and for those few seconds, she was no longer shaking. She was Sarah Harper's daughter, reading the numbers the way Sarah had taught the world to fear. Then a child ran. It happened too fast for planning. A small boy, maybe 6 years old, slipped from the line when one of the guards turned to shout at another man. He bolted toward the old crusher, perhaps thinking the shadows meant escape. His mother cried out, and a guard slapped a hand over her mouth. Ranger heard the child before Ethan saw where he had gone. The dog broke from cover. "Ranger!" Ethan hissed. Too late. Ranger did not charge the guards. He followed the thin sound of the boys sobbing through the rain, limping hard now, head low. He reached the rusted crusher and disappeared behind a sheet of corrugated metal. A second later, his bark cut across the quarry. Not attack. Alarm. Every head turned. "Damn it," Ethan said. Floodlights swung toward the equipment yard. "Move," Ethan told Lily. They ran low along the stacked pipes as shouts broke out behind them. Ethan could have stayed hidden. He could have preserved the footage, waited for Mendez, let the child remain where he was until men with badges came. He did not. Some decisions did not pass through strategy. He found Ranger lying between the boy and the open gap beneath the crusher platform. The child crouched against the metal frame, soaked and shaking, one shoe missing. Ranger's body blocked the boy from view, but the barking had already drawn attention. Ethan grabbed the child and pulled him close. Lily appeared beside him, breathless. "The others are still by the container. Take him through the service cut." "What?" He pointed to a narrow drainage path leading behind the old conveyor. "You said your mother's maps showed a side route." Lily looked once and understood. "It leads toward the lower access road. Go." "What about you?" "Go." This time, she did not argue. She took the boy's hand and ran. Ethan rose as two guards came around the loader. The first held a flashlight and a pistol badly. The second carried a pry bar. Ethan moved before either man expected an older man to move that fast. He drove the flashlight beam aside, struck the first man's wrist, and sent the gun skidding into mud. The second swung the pry bar. Ethan ducked most of it, not all. Pain exploded across his ribs. He slammed the man into the loader's steel tire hard enough to drop him, then staggered as his own breath failed. Age was not weakness, but it was accounting. Every old injury collected interest. He forced air into his lungs and turned toward the container yard. Lily had not gone far. Of course she had not gone far. She had taken the child to the drainage cut, then doubled back along the lower path to the container line. Ethan saw her moving between shadows, using the confusion to wave the trapped group toward the side route. The mother saw the boy and broke from the line. More shouts. Grant Mercer was gone from sight. Harlan was not. Nor was the younger man standing near the third truck, tall and broad, in an expensive field jacket, hair plastered to his forehead by rain, his face twisted with fury rather than fear. Daniel Mercer. Ethan knew him by resemblance before he knew him by name. Grant's son had inherited the Mercer bones without the polish. Daniel saw Lily. He lunged. Lily tried to back away, but mud betrayed her. Daniel caught her arm and wrenched her toward him, one forearm hooking across her chest. The phone fell from her hand into the mud, still recording. "Stop!" Daniel shouted. "Everybody stop!" Ethan stopped, not because Daniel commanded it, because Daniel had a knife at Lily's throat. Ranger growled from Ethan's side, low and broken with pain. Harlan appeared behind Daniel, rain running off the brim of his sheriff's hat. "Well," Harlan said, breathing hard, "this is what happens when people don't leave town business alone." Ethan's ribs burned. His hands hung open at his sides. "Let her go." Daniel laughed. "You first." Lily's eyes found Ethan's. There was fear in them. Real fear. But beneath it was something else. She moved her right hand slowly, barely visible, toward the little silver key at her throat. Then lower, toward the small pocket where she had tucked the backup memory card after filming the container codes. Ethan understood. She still had the evidence. Harlan stepped closer. "You should have stayed gone, Cole." I've heard that. You know, Thomas had the same problem. Thought being decent made him bulletproof. The rain seemed to recede. Ethan's focus narrowed to Harlan's face. What did you say? Harlan smiled, but exhaustion and anger had stripped away his earlier polish. He was going to ruin men who kept this town alive. Men who paid his salary. He got warned. He didn't listen. Ethan took one step forward. Daniel tightened the knife against Lily's skin. Harlan said that hunting trip was supposed to scare him. Then he reached for his rifle. You killed him. I cleaned up a problem. Something inside Ethan went silent. It was not rage yet. It was the moment before rage became action. He saw Thomas in the old photograph. Thomas at 19 pulling Ethan out of a creek by the back of his shirt. Thomas in uniform beside Sarah Harper. Thomas in a coffin while Wade Harlan stood in rain and pretended grief. Ethan moved. Ranger moved first. The old dog launched at Daniel, not with the speed of his younger years, but with every remaining ounce of loyalty in his body. He struck Daniel's side, jaws closing on the sleeve of the knife arm. Lily twisted away as the blade sliced air. Daniel shouted and drove the knife down. Ranger yelped. Ethan crossed the distance in 3 strides and hit Daniel with his shoulder, sending him into the mud. Lily fell hard, but rolled clear. Ethan disarmed Daniel with a twist that nearly tore the man's wrist apart, then kicked the knife away. Harlan drew his sidearm. Ethan was already inside the line of fire. They collided against the side of the truck. Harlan was heavy, strong, desperate. The gun went off once into the rain, deafening in the open yard. Ethan slammed Harlan's wrist against the metal until the weapon dropped. Harlan drove a knee into Ethan's ribs. White pain burst through him. For a second, Ethan saw nothing but Harlan's throat under his hand. He could end it. No court. No delays. No lawyers turning dead people into doubts. No polished men paying for silence. Harlan's eyes widened as he understood. Do it, Harlan rasped. You were always just waiting for a reason. Ethan's grip tightened. Then Ranger cried out. Not loud. Enough. The sound cut through Ethan like a hand closing around his heart. He looked over. Ranger lay in the mud, blood darkening the gold fur at his shoulder. Lily was beside him, one hand pressed to the wound, the other clutching the memory card so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Ethan, she said. His name. Not a command, not a plea to spare Harlan. A callback. Ethan released Harlan's throat and drove him face down into the mud, pinning one arm behind his back. You're under arrest, Ethan said, voice rough. Harlan laughed weakly. You don't have a badge. No. Sirens rose beyond the quarry. Blue and red lights flashed at the north gate, then white federal vehicles cut through the rain. Men shouted. Orders rang out. Carla Mendez's team moved with controlled speed, weapons up, jackets marked in block letters Ethan had never been so glad to see. Mac's voice crackled in Ethan's ear. Tell me you're alive. Ethan looked at Lily, at Ranger, at the people fleeing the container toward federal agents, at Daniel Mercer, face down in the mud with zip ties on his wrists. Mostly, he said. Carla Mendez crossed the yard under a hooded tactical jacket, dark hair tied low, face sharp beneath the rain. She took in the scene quickly. The open container, the freed people, Harlan pinned under Ethan's knee, Lily's bleeding throat scratch, Ranger on the ground. Her gaze stopped on Ethan. Cole? Evidence, he said. Lily raised the memory card. Mendez took it without ceremony. Medical! An agent knelt by Ranger. Lily did not move away. "Grant Mercer," Ethan said. Mendez looked toward the black SUV's empty space. "Gone," one of her agents called. "South Road, minutes ago." "Victor Salazar?" Mac asked through the earpiece, still listening. Another agent shouted from near the trucks. "Driver says Salazar wasn't on site. Dispatch remote." "We have names, but not him." Mendez's jaw tightened. "Secure every phone, every manifest, every plate." Harlan lifted his face from the mud, rain washing dirt from one cheek. "This won't stick," he said. Lily looked at him then. For once, she did not look afraid. "Yes," she said, voice shaking but clear. "It will." Ethan moved off Harlan only when an agent took custody. His ribs screamed as he stood. He ignored them and went to Ranger. The dog's eyes found him. "Hey, buddy," Ethan said, kneeling in the mud. "You stubborn old fool." Ranger's tail moved once. Lily's hand remained pressed to the wound. Rain ran down her face, but Ethan could not tell if any of it was tears. Around them, the quarry changed shape under federal lights. Not clean, not saved, but exposed. For the first time in 16 years, the truth was not a rumor, a dead woman's note, a frightened girl's claim, or an old man's grief. It was alive in the rain. It had faces, numbers, witnesses, blood, video, voices. And though Grant Mercer had vanished into the dark, and Victor Salazar remained beyond reach, Wade Harlan was in cuffs, Daniel Mercer was on his knees, and the container doors stood open. Ethan bent over Ranger as the medical kit arrived. He had chosen not to chase the man who ran. He had chosen the living. For tonight, that would have to be enough. By sunrise, Red Ash had learned how to whisper again. It whispered in the diner, where men who had worn Mercer Materials caps for 20 years stared into coffee gone cold. It whispered outside the hardware store, beneath the television mounted in the window, where Grant Mercer's face appeared beside words no one in town had expected to see attached to him. Federal investigation, human trafficking, corruption probe. It whispered in church parking lots, school hallways, gas pumps, and front porches where people spoke with one hand over their mouths, as if the truth were smoke and might stain them if they breathed too deeply. The town did not wake clean. It woke exposed. Ethan watched it from a chair in the veterinary clinic, one hand resting on Ranger's uninjured shoulder. The dog lay on a padded table under a gray blanket, sedated, but breathing steadily. A white bandage covered the wound near his shoulder, where Daniel Mercer's knife had gone in shallow but ugly. His notched ear twitched once in sleep. Even unconscious, Ranger looked as if he might rise if someone opened the wrong door. "He'll live," Nora Whitcomb said. She stood beside the veterinarian, still wearing yesterday's clothes under a borrowed clinic smock, her blonde gray hair pinned badly at the back of her head. She had come straight from the hospital after hearing about the quarry, because in Red Ash, the line between doctor, neighbor, witness, and accomplice to survival had never been clean. The veterinarian had done the stitching. Nora had stayed because Ethan had not moved from Ranger's side. "He'll be slower," the vet said gently. That leg was already compensating. Now the shoulder will ache in cold weather. "He was already slower," Ethan said. Nora looked at him. That wasn't agreement. Ethan's thumb moved lightly over Ranger's fur. Across the room, Lily sat wrapped in a clinic blanket with a bandage at her neck where Daniel's knife had kissed the skin. She had given statements until her voice went raw. Carla Mendez had taken the memory card, the phone footage, the names Lily could identify, the sequence codes Sarah Harper had marked 16 years earlier. Federal agents had separated the rescued migrants from local law enforcement and moved them under protection before dawn. Lily had not slept. Neither had Ethan. On the small television above the clinic counter, a news anchor repeated the official statement. Sheriff Wade Harlan had been taken into federal custody. Daniel Mercer had been arrested at the quarry. Multiple individuals had been rescued from a container registered under a Mercer shell company. Grant Mercer, prominent Red Ash businessman and philanthropist, was being sought for questioning. Sought. Ethan hated the softness of that word. Lily looked up at the screen. They still say philanthropist. Nora turned the volume down. People don't give up comforting words easily, she said. Outside, a truck drove past slowly. Someone inside looked toward the clinic, then away. Lily noticed. They blame me, she said. Some do, Nora answered. Ethan looked at her. Nora did not soften the truth. Some will say you saved people. Some will say you destroyed jobs. Some will say both and hate you for making them think that hard. Lily's face stayed still. In the corner, June Calloway sat in a wheelchair the clinic had borrowed from next door. Her smoke-damaged voice had roughened overnight, but her eyes were sharp behind her glasses. She held a pencil and a small notebook in her lap, as if preparing to cross-examine the town itself. Good, June said. Let them think. It'll be a first for some of them. Lily looked at her, and something like a smile appeared and vanished. Carla Mendez arrived mid-morning. She entered without drama, dark hair tied low, FBI jacket zipped against the cold, a folder under one arm and rain spots still drying on her boots. She looked tired, but not uncertain. There was a difference. Ranger? She asked first. Ethan nodded toward the table. Alive. Good. Carla turned to Lily. Your footage is usable. So is the container ID. The victim's initial statements match the timing. We recovered manifests from the office trailer at the quarry, plus several phones. Mac Donnelly has already been annoying 3 federal databases on my behalf. Is Grant gone? Lily asked. For now. For now sounds like almost. It is almost. Carla set the folder on the counter. But almost is better than rumor. She opened the folder and slid out a copied page from Sarah Harper's old notes, the one Lily had photographed and sent after Ruth's testimony. On it, Sarah had circled a string of letters and numbers. Lily leaned forward. That's a gate approval code. Carla nodded. Mac matched its format against current digital manifests seized at the quarry. Most approvals can be signed by operations managers. This one can't. It requires executive authorization. Grant, Ethan said. Grant Mercer, Carla confirmed. His attorneys will argue delegation, forgery, system compromise, anything they can reach. But this gives us a direct bridge between Sarah's records and last night's shipment. Lily touched the paper but did not pick it up. A small thing, a code. Not a confession, not an apology, not a mother returned from Black Pine Lake. But it had survived. For a moment, Ethan saw Sarah Harper not as a dead woman in someone else's tragedy, but as a hand writing numbers carefully because she believed someone, someday, might understand them. Lily whispered, She knew. Yes, Carla said. And now we can prove part of what she knew. That was the closest thing to mercy the morning offered. By evening, Grant Mercer was arrested at a private airfield 70 miles north, where federal agents found him with 2 packed bags, a clean passport, and enough cash to insult the idea of innocence. Victor Salazar was taken 2 days later in a warehouse outside Spokane, after Mac traced a chain of dispatch calls and Carla's team followed the freight accounts Mercer had tried to burn behind him. The arrests did not fix Red Ash. They cracked it. Harlan's old office was sealed. Deputies came and went under federal supervision, avoiding cameras and one another. Owen Pike gave his statement in a borrowed conference room at the county building, hands shaking so badly he dropped his metal pen twice before signing. He was suspended pending investigation. He accepted the notice without protest. "I should have done it sooner," he told Ethan outside the room. "Yes," Ethan said. Owen flinched. Then Ethan added, "But you did it." The young deputy looked down at the pen in his hand. "Does that count?" "Not enough." Owen nodded. "But it counts," Ethan said. That was all he could give him. June gave her statement from a hospital bed and refused to let anyone call her brave. Ruth Caldwell arrived under federal escort, wearing a dark coat and the same taped glasses, looking smaller in daylight, but not weaker. When she saw Lily in the hallway, she stopped as if the floor had shifted under her. "I wrote the first line," Ruth said. Lily waited. "The article. I wrote the first line again." "What is it?" Ruth's mouth trembled. Sarah Harper was not silent. Red Ash simply refused to listen. Lily closed her eyes. "That's a good line," she said. "It took me 16 years. "I know." No forgiveness passed between them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But something moved that was not hatred, and sometimes that was the first honest thing grief allowed. A week after the quarry, Lily asked Ethan to drive her to Black Pine Lake. The lake lay beyond the North Ridge, dark and still beneath a low sky. Pines crowded the shore, their reflections broken by wind. This was where Sarah Harper's car had been found 16 years earlier. This was where a town had accepted a lie because it arrived in an official report. Lily brought wildflowers wrapped in paper, a copied photograph of her mother, and a duplicate of Ruth's cassette sealed in plastic. Ranger came too, walking slowly, bandaged shoulder covered by a gray-blue blanket Ethan had folded over him in the truck. He did not like being helped down, but he allowed it because Lily was watching. Ethan stayed back near the trees. This was not his place to stand too close. Lily knelt by the water. She placed the flowers on a flat stone, then the photograph. For a long time, she did not speak. The lake accepted her silence without asking what it meant. Ranger moved beside her and lowered himself carefully, front paws near the edge, head high despite the bandage. Lily rested one hand on his neck. "My mother would have liked you," she told him. "You know how to stay with someone when they're scared, without asking them to explain." Ranger leaned against her. Ethan looked away toward the far shore. He thought of all the men he had known who could enter rooms under fire, but could not sit beside someone else's sorrow. He thought of himself among them. Later, he went to Thomas's grave. The cemetery stood on the hill above Red Ash, where wind moved through dry grass and old flags snapped against small metal poles. Thomas Cole's headstone had been cleaned recently. Ethan did not know by whom. Maybe Nora, maybe June, maybe someone who had been ashamed and found no better offering than a rag and water. Ethan stood before it with Ranger at his side and the old military watch heavy on his wrist. For years, he had imagined this moment as something dramatic, a confession, a collapse, a speech to the dead. Nothing came at first, only wind. Then he said, "I left." The words sounded too plain. He tried again. "I told myself there was nothing to do here. I told myself leaving was the only way not to rot in this town." Maybe part of that was true. He swallowed. But I let silence become easier than questions. I'm sorry for that. Ranger sat slowly beside him. Ethan looked at his brother's name carved into stone. They know now. Not all of it. Maybe not enough. But they know you didn't just die because weather turned bad and luck ran out. The wind moved over the hill. Ethan placed one hand on the top of the headstone. The stone was cold, solid, real in a way memory never was. I can't fix it, he said. But I can stop running from where it happened. That was all. It was not enough. It was true. Spring came slowly to Red Ash. Not gently, slowly. Mercer signs came down from the water tower only after 3 town meetings and 2 shouting matches in the parking lot. Some people argued the name should stay because history was history. Others said history without honesty was just advertising. The letters were finally painted over on a cold Saturday morning while half the town watched and pretended not to care. Lily reopened her mother's small house on Birch Street. The place needed paint, plumbing, and courage. She turned the front room into a file space with donated shelves, locked cabinets, and a hand-painted sign taped to the window. Community Records Assistance, archive requests, case files, public documents. Someone threw a rock through the window the first week. The next morning, June arrived with a broom, Ruth arrived with a box of labeled clippings, and Nora arrived with coffee strong enough to remove paint. Ethan replaced the glass before noon. Lily did not thank him. She handed him a second pane and said, "You missed the corner." He almost smiled. Ethan did not sell the cabin. At first, he told himself it was because the estate paperwork had become complicated under federal seizure reviews. Then because the fence needed repair. Then because Ranger needed quiet to heal. Finally, one evening, while replacing a rotten post with his sleeves rolled up and mud on his boots, he stopped lying. He was staying. The cabin still held ghosts, but ghosts, he had learned, did not always ask a man to leave. Sometimes they waited to see whether he would finally do the work. Ranger lay on the porch in a patch of pale sun, bandaged shoulder healing, ears angled toward the road. His limp was more visible now. His muzzle looked wider than it had before the quarry. But when a car slowed near the gate, his head lifted, and the old fire returned to his eyes. Lily came up the path, carrying 2 coffees in a cardboard tray. She wore a blue-gray cardigan over jeans and boots, her hair tied loosely at the nape of her neck. The burn at the ends had been cut away. The silver key still rested at her throat. She looked tired, but no longer hunted. "One for you," she said, handing Ethan a cup. "What's the other?" "For me." "I figured that out." "Then why ask?" "Conversation."
You're bad at it.
"I'm practicing." She sat on the porch step near Ranger, who accepted her presence with the dignity of an old king receiving tribute. She scratched behind his notched ear. Across the yard, the repaired fence ran straight for the first time in years. Beyond it, the road curved through the pines toward Red Ash. The same road that had brought Ethan back. The same road that had carried Lily toward a crash, a fire, and the truth no one wanted. The town beyond it remained damaged. Some people still would not speak to Lily. Some still lowered their voices when Ethan entered a store. Some called June a liar until Ruth's article printed and then called her disloyal instead. Justice had arrived with paperwork, warrants, hearings, and protective orders, not with cleansing fire. It had left stains. But the silence had broken. That mattered. Ethan looked at the road for a long time. For most of his life, a road had meant departure, escape, distance, survival measured in miles. Now, beneath the porch roof of his father's cabin, with Lily beside the old dog and the smell of fresh-cut cedar in the air, the road looked different. Not safe, not easy, but open both ways. Ranger lowered his head onto his paws, eyes half closed, ears still listening. Lily sipped her coffee and looked toward town. "Do you think it gets better?" she asked. Ethan considered lying, not because she needed comfort, but because he wanted, suddenly and painfully, to be the kind of man who knew how to offer it. "No," he said at last, "not by itself." She nodded. After a moment, she said, "Then I guess we keep fixing what we can." Ethan looked at the fence, the cabin, the road, the town, the girl who had refused to let the dead be buried under someone else's story, and the old dog who had pulled them all back toward the living. "Yeah," he said. The wind moved through the pines. For the first time in many years, Ethan did not hear it as something calling him away. Sometimes the truth does not bring back what we have lost. It does not erase the years of silence, the pain of betrayal, or the names carved into stone. But truth can give the living a place to stand again. Ethan, Lily, and Ranger remind us that healing is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like staying when running would be easier. Sometimes it looks like protecting one wounded soul, telling one buried truth, or choosing not to let fear have the final word. May God give us the courage to face what hurts, the grace to forgive what we can, and the peace to keep repairing what is still in our hands. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories of courage, hope, and quiet redemption, please subscribe and stay with us for the next one.